I've been staying with Twente Additive Manufacturing in Nelson, British Columbia, Canada, and it's been quite a treat spending time with Ian Comishin and Jim Ziemlanski, checking out their facility where they're 3D printing all kinds of incredible structures. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Well, we're stoked you came.
Today, I've convinced them to sit down with me for an extended period of time and have kind of a long-form interview-style conversation. So I guess since we've already had an episode of this, it's one of our more successful podcast episodes. Why don't you give the audience kind of an update on, maybe, Jim, you could tell them about what you guys are working on now.
Well, right now we're trying to wrap up a couple of projects. So we've got a park perimeter, which includes a perimeter for the bark mulch and the playground equipment, and benches as well. So we're printing all the parts for that, getting them installed. We'll be wrapping that up this week. There's also the Fibonacci House, which we've been working on for a few months now this summer, so we're also trying to wrap that up. We've got a rock scan that we're printing to, that we're wrapping up this week. We're getting ready for the winter. We have a lot of outdoor work to do out at our site, so we've got a lot of things like that going on.
That's a lot to unpack. What about you, Ian?
I think first thing we should take note of why your first podcast is so successful, and that's because we had the handsome Jonathan Ledser in that one, and he's not here, so I'm not sure this one's going to be as successful. But we've been really kind of pushing our fingers into as many different areas in the industry as possible. If you had asked us 2 years ago what this company looked like now, I would have said, it's going to be a company that develops and builds machines. But because there's such a sort of gap of knowledge from the conventional construction industry to what this new construction methods are going to be, that we've really had to become experts in a lot of other facets that we didn't even really expect to. So from the materials side to the architectural side to material handling, all of these things, we felt that there wasn't really a solution out there that was easily applicable or integratable into what we're doing. So we've had to become kind of fast experts in all that stuff as well too. So that's kind of, I wouldn't say it's what we're currently working on, it's like what we're continuously working on. So it occupies a lot of the team's time to try to catch up.
Yeah, get acquainted with how things are done and things we haven't necessarily done before.
Yeah, I've noticed that as a company you use your own products quite a bit. Can you tell me about how you've learned through being kind of your own best customer? Well, we have a lot of projects out at the site there, which, there's infrastructure, there's, landscaping architecture and things like that. So we've really been trying to use our products,
huge variety of different potential prints that we have to do.
Retaining walls, culverts, stairs, siding. So we're doing.
Yeah, I've always been a big fan of vertical integration, anyways. So anything that you're doing that you're not counting on a subcontractor to do for you is just added knowledge to the product evolution, anyways. So even though we know guys could have come in and done a way better job than us on certain things, by forcing our own guys to build this stuff ourselves, we kind of have a better relationship, I think, with how our product is going to be used by people later on. If we are selling to people on the other side of the planet, we want to be able to coach them through their headaches from having a bit of experience ourselves. We don't want them to be discovering problems about our stuff that we haven't figured out ourselves already. So.
Sure. Right now, you're dealing with contractors mostly for the Fibonacci House. Can you talk to me a little bit about how the 3D printed concrete has been involved in that and how the technologies have integrated with traditional contractors?
Yeah. Well, we really took on this project with the intention of learning a lot ourselves. So originally we weren't going to use any contractors at all, and we were going to get dirty and put the tool belt on. And we do have some construction experience in our past, but to apply it with 3D printed concrete has been a whole other challenge for sure. So, getting the other contractors that have come in to help us with the wood framing, for the most part, it's just been wood framing. We had a guy come in and do our slab to float it properly for us. And
not a lot of other contractors been called in.
No.
But at the same time, we decided that having so much of our team dedicated to things that are not actually part of the 3D printing scope. It's sort of maybe bad use of our time. So we kind of pivoted away from doing the whole thing ourselves and then started calling in on other people to come in. But it's it's a tiny house, so it's not that lucrative of a contract for people who do, big houses or apartment structures. And so they really just try to slot us in where they can. Sometimes days or weeks can go by before they can make availability for us.
Yeah.
So we got to see this really fast assembly of this house, like the 3D printed portion of it. I think we printed and we were standing and basically we had a shell of the structure there in a matter of weeks, like less than a month. And then for months and months now it's been dragging on the completion of it because we don't really have the allure to get people to come out there and bang everything together one after another and get it all done. So
yeah, it's a really busy season right now. Everything's going to freeze up soon. So all these contractors have jobs that they're trying to tidy up. So to come out for such a small job is challenging.
You said they poured the slab, but really most people would think that they did the formwork and pouring, but you guys did the formwork.
We did the formwork.
He just floated the slab.
Only came in for the one day to float the slab for us. He has all his travel, bull floats and stuff like that.
So you poured it and he
just
smoothed it out.
He did, yeah, exactly. We did.
Yeah, and it's because he's a friend of ours who lives just up the road from KLV, so it was super easy to get him to come over. And he probably wouldn't have done it if it was just for money.
Somebody else, yeah.
He did it because he likes us and he's pretty excited to see what we've got going on out there. So
yeah, there's a lot of enthusiasm from the community out there about what we're doing. A lot of excitement.
Elon Musk, I think, recently said that we should have baby showers, but for businesses, like business showers. So when your friend starts a new business, everybody kind of pitches in resources to help them expand. And I've kind of noticed you guys do that. You've been given kind of some resources like the timber frame for the roof of the Fibonacci House.
Yeah.
And that guy helping you float the concrete. So it's great to see, I guess, Elon's image of how to start a good business and how to be a good friend to your business.
I was wondering how long it was going to take for Elon Musk to come up in this podcast. It seems as ubiquitous as air now in technology conversations, doesn't it?
It does get a bit redundant, I guess, at times.
That's okay. I mean, I like the idea of actually doing some sort of celebration of these different things as they're launching. For us, for a company, I wouldn't even say we're legitimately fully formed as a business yet because we are still in our startup stage, right? We're self-financed. We've been doing everything kind of from the perspective of being able to switch or pivot to, the right revenue stream when it shows up. So, hopefully, 12 to 24 months from now, we'll actually be able to zero in on something that actually is something that we can really bring to the rest of the world. For now, we're kind of experts in everything. So, yeah, we want to be total experts in the one thing that actually is the business model for the company. So
Very much an exploratory phase, experimenting with
Still
Yeah.
are, yes.
yeah, it's because the maturity of the industry itself is just not there. It's
Well,
not
it's
just
changing
us.
so fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're learning and keeping up with what's current events in 3D concrete printing world right now too. So another 6 months, a year, it's going to look totally different.
Yeah.
In terms of acceptance and capabilities, right?
We've probably got the first time something's been done in the world every 2 or 3 weeks up there. That's eventually going to stop. There's going to be a critical mass of people doing this kind of experimental work that we aren't going to be the inventors of everything. So, but it's pretty exciting. We think of something that we've never seen before, and we just go for it.
Yeah, we're dynamic and nimble enough that we can go ahead and pursue those things.
We talked about this a little bit in our first podcast, but the origins of this company are from a skating company. And I guess I don't know if I really made the connection as strongly then as I do now, that your experience in 3D modeling and 3D computer-aided design kind of comes from using CNC machines with skateboards.
Oh yeah.
So you guys used to skate together?
Well, Jim was actually one of the world-class pro downhill skateboarders for a little while. I was a wannabe in the same circle, but never as high on the podium. But we kind of got into the CNC through skateboarding because Jim was living up in Prince George and had an opportunity. Was it the University of Prince George or another?
College of New Caledonia had a CNC machine and they had Mastercam licenses. So I started hanging out at the college there, learning, reading their books, and figuring it out. And the other professors there saw what I was doing and invited me to come and teach 3 hours a week to their one of their technology programs.
Cool.
But it's fair to say in the early 2000s, like the stuff that Jim was coming up with and the things we were doing, we were, breaking ground in how you could make skateboards with CNC technology back then.
And Ian says I was, world champion, or no, I don't think I was world champion. I was more of a North American celebrity for a little while. But it wasn't necessarily my skill set, it was my equipment. I had new cutting edge equipment that was tighter tolerance, more aligned, precision, machined and stuff like that.
Wow.
And
Wait, hold on 1 second.
Yeah.
This camera died, and this is really, this is great.
Yeah. Well, you want to just stop on the other one too then? Might as well.
Yeah.
Repipe, start yourself another 30 minutes.
So you were just talking about how your
He's being humble though.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I'm sure he had good
so he's
equipment.
saying that I was doing really well in the downhill racing circuit in North America, and it wasn't necessarily because of my skill set, even though I was there with the guys, but my equipment is really what set me apart from everybody else. I would go to the start line and look at everybody else's gear and see that I was gonna walk on this race and win, and, as long as I didn't make mistakes.
Yeah.
That's kind of how it went for a couple of years until all the other racers started getting the same high precision quality.
To some degree, it seems like you're still embodying that nature today, where you didn't necessarily go to college to be an engineer, but you have all this equipment kind of at your disposal, and you're an engineer without a doubt. You're dealing with the materials and the equipment, mechanics, electrical, even software programming.
Yeah.
You've designed your own hardware kind of for the, or integrated the hardwares together. So with the equipment and without the traditional knowledge, you guys are extremely competitive.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'd say our team is all enthusiastic like this. We love our technology.
We're backed by real engineers in our organization now. For sure, back then when we were doing this skate company, we were perhaps maybe not necessarily counted on the math so much and the make it break it philosophy.
Yeah.
But we've got guys that have the conventional training in our organization now, and especially when it comes to things like large load carrying, safety factors that are important, finite element analysis. So we do have a strong team of engineers at Twente who are making sure that what we build is safe. I mean, that's kind of first and foremost in any kind of industrial machinery application, is that the people who work those machines can't get hurt. And there's a way that they can safely operate it and obviously generate some kind of profit for the company that bought this equipment. So
20 years ago, we were a little more gung-ho, just going and trying stuff, but now, we're definitely.
There's definitely a skater mentality in the organization still.
The origins.
It comes from, I think, just sort of going for it, as opposed to making sure that everything is
succeed.
perfectly thought out, so.
Yep. From my perspective, it's been really cool to see that skater mentality come out in the interactions that we've had, especially around your technology. There's a huge difference between the way you guys interact with me as a kind of journalist and a researcher, and the way that many of these other companies have interacted with me in terms of, I guess, their openness to allowing certain footage and talking openly about things that aren't going well. The other day, a print had an issue midway, and instead of asking me to turn the camera off, you kind of just explained to me what was going on and how to fix it, mitigated the problem. You were able to resume the print immediately, exactly from the location it messed up. And that's an insight that most companies would want to hide. I guess some of that comes from the fact that you're kind of self-funded at this point, so you have that freedom, but it's something that I really hope you guys are able to carry forward with you as you grow.
Yeah, perhaps it's like in hindsight, it's not very good marketing strategy to show our weaknesses out so openly like that. But there is actually a real issue in this 3D printing world right now, is that there has been some really horribly false claims that were made about what this technology can do, from a price point, from a deliverable point, from the timing, and just availability of this technology. And it's made it so that there's a lot of people who think that they can have a house for $5,000 next week if they just phone us up and we send a printer over. And so, being able to make it known that all technology has pros and cons to it, and if the people are aware of what kind of failings these things can potentially have, we can have a much more mature conversation with people about how to integrate this really amazing step forward in the construction industry into their toolbox, but not from false expectations or from the sort of like clickbait or hype that's been going on around 3D printing. It's actually, I think, almost held the industry back for sure. A couple of companies got some big funding raises for it, but you know their investors are going to be a little choked when they find out that like that $6,000 house is actually $60,000, or you know there's these types of like hiding truths. I know it's really common in a lot of things in our current time where fake news is thrown around as often as Elon Musk's name has been thrown around. But you know, if we can educate people at the same time as get them excited about working with us, then that's kind of a win-win for us. So yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah, it'll move things forward for us. You know, we're not shy to tackle these issues, right? And deal with them. So.
It's so much easier to be honest too. You don't have to cover yourself
Yeah.
up.
I think it's not something that you'll regret, just because beyond, sure, in the short term, exposing your weaknesses is a hindrance, but in the long term, it's establishing a relationship with people who are learning about this technology from you guys and getting feeling like they can trust you, which is valuable. I mean, at this stage, everybody can kind of trust a company that's in a starting up and like funding stage, because that's exciting, I guess. I think especially in America, everybody has a little bit of an entrepreneurial spirit of at least just getting excited that people are going off on their own, and kind of with that skater's rebellion mentality against one of the biggest, oldest industries, construction industry.
It is exciting. Yeah, it's exciting.
You guys talk about like it's a company, it's an organization, but at the same time, it's like it's an idea, and it's like a
But there's a lot of people signed on already, and even if we are self-financed right now, we're a team of like almost 20 people at this point. We've got people in Dubai, all over Europe, here in North America. We've got a couple of satellites, people doing things. So we're attracting a lot of people to want to join us for sure. And I think actually getting back to the honesty thing, that actually serves really well to recruitment as a method to get people excited about coming and working with us. They identified a problem that maybe we can solve, that they can solve by joining us, or they can see like this is not just going to be punching stamps on paperwork and moving things through. It's exciting for an engineer to know that there's something they can solve if they want to join us. So.
So for projects can you describe the optimal project? So a lot of people call you and they want a house for $5,000, and those are frustrating phone calls, maybe annoying you more than robocalls at this point. But what's your ideal call go like?
Yeah. Okay. So they frustrate us from the standpoint that
expectations.
They start from expectation, but it also is really exciting that people are like visualizing this technology in their neighborhoods. And we still want them to call us and ask us that dumb question, but we'll try to quickly get them excited about how the reality of this technology can benefit them. But if I was to say there's like an ideal project for us, that would be one where it's like a very large established construction firm who is trying to step outside of the box that they themselves have been operating in for a very long time. So if a bunch of startups are doing business with a bunch of other startups, then really it's almost like there's one shilling that's being passed around amongst everybody, and it circulates nowhere and it doesn't grow. But if there's a way that we can get people who are outside of the 3D printing industry to get excited about this, and I think Cobod did a really good job of getting Perry involved, and Icon has done a pretty phenomenal raise in getting obviously the NASA and the military contracts coming towards them. So this is like the type of thing that all of us in the industry should be trying to do, is to try to pull more people from outside of the 3D printing industry in. Because it's going to help everything come up. So,
the unfortunate part is the times when that happens and people from the outside the industry really get exposure to it is those fake news times, and those are the headlines that are getting like 1 million views. And I guess that's breeding the issue of all these people that are kind of have unreasonable expectations.
There's a lot of smart people out there too. For sure, there's people who run big construction firms, guys who are doing big tilt-up wall buildings or other prefab concrete, and they can look at what this is and they can immediately see, okay, there's some inherent trappings in that type of technology where reinforcement doesn't seem to be completely solved, or where materials that are specialized materials hasn't been solved, and they can see how this technology it's going to go somewhere, but it's not going to be this miracle.
Not right away.
That is being sort of fakely represented out there. So guys who are building big skyscrapers or big apartment complexes, they're not looking at this stuff and being tricked by any kind of false claims or fake news media out there. They're looking at it as being, okay, these guys are onto something, and so
they're keeping an eye on it.
A perfect project would be one of them coming in and saying, we don't want you to build a whole house or a whole structure for us, but we'd really like you to take on, say, the retaining walls and the staircases and maybe some decorative columns for the front, and maybe if you got some way to help us deal with this really tricky foundation or footing at the back, because we've got all this weird bedrock. And they can identify that we've got these specialized skills. I mean, at Twente, we've been working on trying to come up with a bunch of skills that the construction industry can really see how this technology benefits them. But if we want to try to just get out there and replace what already exists, well, it doesn't really make sense.
Yeah, it doesn't really make sense. Yeah. There's a lot of innovation to be had and developed with this technology. So, yeah, looking for people that can, or companies that can implement it or want to experiment with it.
Who was the designer of the Fibonacci House?
I think it was all of us.
Collaborative.
Tim, I had the
Jonathan?
idea first, which someone told me was actually in a video from Jason, which is very weird. So we like to think we're all original, but apparently a lot of people have been thinking about 3D, a Fibonacci House. But we're a little bit math nerds for sure in our group, and so we thought that would be
really appealing.
Yeah. But it was we talked about it in the other podcast. It was to really try to screw ourselves up. Like, we wanted to make this thing miserable for us to build from a standpoint, and so not having easily measurable reference points for a bunch of prefab elements was part of one of the stresses we want to put ourselves through on that one. So, but I think most of the credit probably goes to Tim for the style and the feel and the shape of it. The way it coordinated with that slab that was already there and the roof angle and whatnot.
Yeah,
so.
Tim was challenged with the slicing and the program development for the actual printer. So there's a lot of considerations to be made when you're designing.
Mm-hmm.
So.
You mentioned earlier you have real engineers. To me, anytime you're messing with hardware and you're making adjustments to hardware and the software, that's hardcore engineering in my mind. Can you talk a little bit about your journey from, start from the point where you know about the CNC technology from skating? How did you develop the skills you have now with 3D printed concrete? Were there main hurdles that you had to overcome?
That's a long story, I guess I would say. I mean, it started with learning to use CAD software and being able to create shapes and models of things that were very difficult to build, which led me to CNC technologies, learning it myself so that I could take matters into my own hands and actually create these things with my own programs and stuff like that. So, after I kind of got my head around how that all works, I started applying it in other industries. There's a timber frame company out here called Spearhead Timberworks, and Ian heard about a job there. And when in between here, we were making skateboards in Montreal, and then I came out west here to get a ski pass again, and I wound up falling in with this company here. And I got with this company called Spearhead Timberworks. They had just purchased a Hundigger, which is a joinery machine for timber work. And my CNC experience qualified me for the position, so I started with them when they started that. So working with this company, they are an amazing architectural solutions company. They don't necessarily do the whole project themselves. They focus on the frame and the connector hardware and stuff like that. So I got to see what was going on in very high-level customized homes. All the we're laser cutting our own connector hardware and having CNC cut templates and jigs and things like that along with this other machine. So I got to learn quite a bit about what's happening in a real digital manufacturing environment, almost in advance of before it became common knowledge that that's what it is now.
It feels like foreshadowing.
Yeah, it was, yeah. In 2005 when I first started there, they were already fully digitally manufacturing and coordinating trades with a BIM, in kind of a very rudimentary fashion. But they were coordinating and project managing all the other things that were happening. And so I got to see all of this and how they worked, and they were such high-level clients. The money was there, the customization was there, the materials were there, the equipment was there. It was fantastic to see that and be a part of it, I guess.
Yeah.
That's how I kind of got started with Twente. That's where I left that section and started with Twente to.
We sort of come from that
robots,
generation where, the digitization of manufacturing that preceded everything is obviously what the automotive industry did, which is kind of inaccessible because people who are in the automotive industry are obviously these multi-billion-dollar companies, and we kind of our age category, the ones where we actually did have computers in our classrooms growing up, were the first ones to really see how we can apply this stuff all over the place. And Spearhead obviously jumped on pretty early from a construction standpoint. Timber framing is very different than 3D printing concrete, but he's already gone through the whole exercise of seeing how conventional building strategies get moved over into digitization. And so he brings an experience set to Twente that we're super fortunate to have.
Yeah, as 20 expands, maybe you bring back some of that CNC experience.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's just expanding right now using 6-axis robots and 9-axis machines. It's just a whole another push of the forefront of my knowledge, anyway.
Well, let's be honest. We shouldn't be doing anything with 3D printed concrete that can be done more effectively with something else.
Yeah.
Right? We want to do this for the added value of it. And if we want to do like some kind of really cool project, it should include some digital manufacturing of timber frame and maybe some digital manufacturing of glassware or windows or other things. Like we're kind of on this journey started in the 3D printing world because it was the one that looked like it had the least amount of technological progress or development so far. But there's no reason why Twente isn't going to be doing all this stuff at some point in the future, because it makes sense that everything gets digitized eventually. That's just the right way to build stuff.
Yeah. That's something we're very parallel on. I try to keep my focus on automation and construction rather than just 3D printing specifically. I've been very interested in 3D printing, but like you're saying, there's so many ways you can automate different tasks. And so to be material agnostic and to really just look at all of them, I think that's a phenomenal character. So you were getting to, that's kind of where your CNC experience was, and then you guys kind of get your first robotic arm. Is that you built your first printer from a robotic arm?
Well, that's Tim was pushing that.
Yeah.
So we actually all sat down before we even started making anything, and we talked about what kind of printers we wanted to make. And of course, Jim and I immediately were leaning towards gantry structures because that's our background, right? And Tim was excited about the 6-axis technology, and really not that robot arm itself, because they've been around for years and years, but more the control softwares that were getting developed in the open source world. And so now I know it's been repeated over and over in a lot of your things, but what the Grasshopper add-on has done for Rhino, and the ability for people to really collaborate and share across the planet different ways of creating code or robotic or any type of motion control has been really interesting. And the things he could show us what he was able to do with his KUKA right out of the gate. We were like, oh, of course.
It seemed obvious. Yeah.
So we'll still bring a lot of our heavy machinery experience to our robot build. So you've seen our structure out there. It's a massive structure, and that's not like conventional 6-axis domain. That's really like big, heavy-duty machinery, gantry structures, or other types of discrete manufacturing structures that we have in our wheelhouse. But those robots are phenomenal. They can pretty much do anything you ask them to do, so long as the part file can fit into their usually pretty crappy memory, unfortunately.
So we're still not totally exclusively 6-axis robots. I mean, there's a lot of advantages to the gantry and even the Delta and some of these other types out there. But the whole Grasshopper thing, for me, that was like the one thing that I hadn't really been exposed to in my development up until meeting up with Twente and getting started here. Tim really seeing that Grasshopper and the capability, and it was like a piece of my puzzle, like a piece of my tool set that was missing. Totally.
You're probably fast realizing you should be doing an interview with Tim.
Tim as well.
Maybe I'll get the chance to.
Yeah. Well, he's got his little R&D shop in Germany there that we've been doing some test printing there. Mm-hmm. Actually, it's been mostly focused on materials testing that he's doing. So because it's centralized, a lot of the players who are making 3D printable mortars are based in Europe, so it's a good gathering point for him to set stuff up.
I never get sick of hearing about Grasshopper. It's such an integral part of, I guess, maybe the future of architecture and construction. It's so useful, and I guess some people don't understand parametric design. The people that do don't really need an explanation of it, but to be able to make adjustments at a small scale to a huge drawing quickly is like incredibly valuable. And I guess it would be really cool for either you guys, if you ever had time to, or if I ever could on my platform, if someone could make like a instructional video for 3D printing with Grasshopper, that would be a huge benefit.
There's so many different ways to go about it.
Yeah. There are actually phenomenal Rhino Grasshopper tutorials online already. Like people doing all sorts of things for obviously additive manufacturing, but just
maybe I could just collect them and put the links in one place or something.
Yeah, that'd be good. Yeah.
Some highlights.
Well, you interviewed the parametric architecture guys. They tend to share a lot of links to this stuff as well. So
the unfortunate thing is he has a whole brand around it online, but he doesn't really do parametric architecture himself. It's kind of like the equivalent of like me with 3D printed concrete. I'm not an expert on printing it. I'm just talking to the experts. He's kind of the same.
Well, we need guys like you to actually share that information around. I mean, a lot of the inspiration we've got is from, guys like Volker at Vertico and, Cobot and all these other companies are out there. If we're not able to, if they didn't share with the rest of the world what they were up to, we wouldn't really know necessarily the right path that we should be taking. So it's awesome you guys are doing this stuff.
Yeah.
So
a lot of people don't know this was actually the first time I was able to see printed concrete in person. So all this research and everything I've been doing, this is the first time I saw the process live.
Yeah, that blew our mind.
Yeah, it's an honor to show you your first live print.
I really appreciate it, and because of that, I can say, there were, for the most part, everything went totally smoothly. There was a little bit of issues that you guys weren't shy about, and the other companies haven't shown me that process. So you can't look down on the issues, because 3D printing has issues all the time. Anybody who's done a lot of 3D printing, especially when you're testing a model that nobody's ever printed before, there's all kinds of stuff that can come up. So I think if all of the companies were completely transparent,
dropping the gauntlet. From now on, whenever Jared's there, you gotta let him see him print. You gotta let him see you guys print.
It would definitely go a long way. I don't know. Maybe we can talk the other companies into it now. You guys led by example, or we'll see.
Did you get him to work the shovel?
No, we didn't work the shovel.
Everybody's got to work the shovel.
I'd be happy to.
We've got this young engineer who's been trying to develop a hopper for us, and it's been going on a pretty long time.
Still shoveling.
Still shoveling. So, next print, maybe we'll
one of the guys I've met, or he's
Jared, OJ.
OJ. He's working on developing a hopper.
He's not really OJ. He's the other Jared.
The other Jared.
There's two Jareds around now. It's a unique name, Jared, especially with a T at the end, two T's, but it's been a confusing few weeks a little bit around the office when Ian called for Jared to...
Yeah, two guys
pop
up.
Look. Yeah.
Yeah, anyway.
Yeah.
So, you get the robotic arm, and are you responsible for developing the extruder head and attaching that?
That's been collaborative, for sure. That's definitely with Jonathan and Tim.
Yeah, so we have like a lot of development in our own nozzle, but then we also use the patented technology from Valmet for our 2K stuff right now. And and they're a pretty awesome company. They've done some really decent research and development to get their nozzle head to where it is. And we're somewhat constrained.
Still developing. Yeah.
We're somewhat constrained by it only uses a single type of material, and it's under agreement with Valmet that we only use their material for that nozzle, which we totally respect that. But the idea of having to ship material from Austria to Canada is kind of a bit of a tough thing for us to swallow. Mm-hmm. So we do print our really high-end stuff with that nozzle, but then the 1K material, we're using a lot of Latacrete material, and a few other companies out there who are developing 1K materials, and it's through all of our own nozzles. And I don't know, do we even use the same nozzle twice? Like there's some kind of iteration every couple
We're
of days.
always trying new things with the nozzle, and it's amazing. It's just a tube with the concrete coming out of it, but it's quite. There's a lot of features and things you can change and get a different result, whether it's bead width, height, shape, and all
Yeah,
kinds
I mean,
of
it's
stuff.
fluid dynamics inside of something that's got a lot of surface area for the amount of actual material that's passing through it. So, like, very minor changes in the mix ratio or changes in the length of the tube that it's traveling through, like all these things, they're immediately visible on the part.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you actually did some close-ups of the Fibonacci House, but you can see that we've got like completely different print qualities from one day to the next, and we,
Different parts.
we have to do these like hundreds upon hundreds of hours of prints to kind of get all the data to show why is it that today we're getting like a little bit of a pulsing effect in our print, and then another day we're getting like hooks coming off, and
Yeah,
so it's super complicated what goes on inside the actual extrusion head, and we haven't completely got it figured out. But we can tell from all the other prints out there in the world that nobody's got it completely figured out yet.
There's irregularities everywhere.
Yeah.
The honesty will start paying dividends, I think, when you're on your second house or your third house, where you've kind of like figured out these nuanced kind of details and different.
Well, we already know that the next house we print wouldn't even remotely resemble the one we just printed, right?
Not at all. No.
Like, I'd say almost every
We
single
want something
every
way
single
more
thing
challenging.
we did there. It's going to be more challenging, but
Yeah.
almost every single thing we did there is going to be done differently. Like, not one of the things we did there we would stick with.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
I think that's a big part of like if somebody who's considering buying a printer is probably going to want to see a really nice finished product of a 3D printed house,
Mhm.
if their main goal is to print a house.
Yeah.
I'd imagine there's a big number of people that kind of have their finger on the trigger and are just waiting to see the right house and have the confidence that
Yeah.
they could buy and replicate.
Well, it's the holy grail is the house, of course. I think we've all agreed
so.
that like completely printing a house from concrete is not really the smartest application of technology, but it's the exciting application of technology. And we were talking about dropping the gauntlet. Like, the guys who've been printing houses out there ahead of us basically said, like, if you want to be a player in this industry, you got to be able to print a house. So we set out to do it. And like. And it's been a bit hard to stomach for guys like Tim, who's like an incredibly like pragmatic and smart designer. He wants to know
Very
why
thorough.
we're not only using 3D printing for where it best suits the purpose, and we're kind of making things difficult for ourselves by printing things that. Oh, so this one probably stopped. Why we're printing things that maybe should have been done through conventional formwork or something, and he kind of goes along with it because he trusts that there is a marketing side of what we're trying to do here, and it is important for us to, we have to play the game of what people want. You can't tell the world
Where's the
what they're
excitement?
supposed to want. Yeah. So
That being said, the design of the Fibonacci house would be pretty tricky to do with precast or with any kind of formwork. So I don't know, it would be tricky to really get a quote on how much a contractor would charge to form
It
concrete
would
like
be
that.
very difficult, yeah, because the design would change. For sure, it wouldn't look exactly like it does if we had somebody else compete in conventional building practices.
Mhm.
So,
But there's already, it's not the cheapest, but there's value in that kind of style in a one-off project would kind of be unachievable with traditional methods.
can't
So
even be made. Yeah.
well, we know that house couldn't be made for less than what we made it for. If
Mhm.
we were to hire a contractor to come in and do that, there's no way they could have done it for what we did.
But I guess
I don't even know what our exact final costs are because we still have some unfinished contractors to hire, but we're still coming way under what it would be to have conventional building do that structure. But the argument is, if you want a little rectangular box that has the exact same square footage and sleeping space, then no, we're probably more expensive than
I'm
that.
not going to compete with that at this time.
I think Tim has a similar perspective to me in appreciating function over form and wanting it to be not just beautiful but practical. And so a lot of the argument around 3D printing for construction is focused on the design possibilities and making it look nice. I think you mentioned Jonathan liked the parametric design of the cladding for the building. Which is kind of an example of something that you can do 3D printed, but not really regularly. Whereas maybe I'm imagining Tim would give some pushback on that because it's not really practical to necessarily do that. But if you guys decide to go with that, it's not a practicality thing. It's a showcasing your technology. I guess.
Well, there's also a lot of discoveries to be made in pursuing things that wouldn't normally be practical too, right? Because we are discovering a lot of things that actually are feasible while we're trying things that would conventionally be. a lot
Yeah,
easier.
I think we might have painted Tim to be a little bit boring. That's not the case at all, actually. He's done some pretty creative stuff for us. I think he's more just of the opinion that if there's an added value to doing it, then you should do it. If there's not an added value to doing it, then move on to something where you can actually do added value.
Yeah.
So.
There's definitely some serendipity sometimes in doing things that aren't necessarily obviously adding value. And sometimes you kind of do something just for fun, or you do something a little more on the creative side, and it ends up showing you maybe it's a difficult aspect of a print that you learned can be like mitigated or something. I don't know.
Yeah, or utilized. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
All right, we're not delusional. We don't have our heads in the sand about what clickbait plays in a role in a company becoming more known and how well it's going to be able to engage with its market. You have to become recognized for doing something, and if all you're doing is these really crazy, cool foundation structures that people backfill and they're behind dirt and no one ever sees them, then it's going to be very, very slow growth, and you're going to try to just open up your market from a grassroots sales strategy only. Whereas, if we're to do things that gets the excitement of the general public, which, we talk about how much we're frustrated about people calling and asking for $5,000 houses, that's also created the excitement that, got us into it. Like, we saw that and thought, holy, this is really awesome. Let's try to jump into this. And so we're going to have to keep doing that balance of, not necessarily nonsensical projects, but projects that are maybe outside of the scope of what the technology is best used for, because it gets people excited. But then there's other projects, like, so for example, Jim brought up the playground project we're doing here. It's a perfect application for it. Like, if you were to get someone to quote, doing a kokanee salmon that's about a third of an acre in size, and deliver it in under a couple weeks, and install it, and have the thing, visible from space now, like, they would charge probably over 100, 150 grand for something like that. And I think we did that project for about 21,000.
Wow.
So it's like an absolute fraction of the cost of using some of those other building techniques. So this is the type of application that we want to get people excited about. So
It's definitely inherently human to appreciate something that's unique as opposed to just a cookie cutter object. I think everybody kind of likes having something custom.
I would tend to agree. Yeah. Absolutely.
You were talking about some of the benefits of the robotic arm versus the gantry system, and it made me draw kind of a parallel to like the network advantages. I guess I wanted to compare it to like Apple to Google, but because it's open source, it's kind of like that's an Android quality, but the network utility is kind of an Apple quality. I guess having all of the people using robotic arms developing softwares for it, there's all resources online that you can pull from. Whereas a gantry system, I guess there's similar resources to some degree, but it's less explored.
I mean, we can say that all robotic arms are equal, but that's not true. There's actually differentiation between them as well.
Sure
So,
is,
Would you, if you were to say one would be like the Apple or the Google or like a Linux?
Well,
this is a debate that's gonna get us in
the
trouble.
grasshopper is really what's kind of equalizing between all these robots, because each robot manufacturer has their code and their service team, which is not cheap to hire to implement custom solutions, right? But Grasshopper seems to be the way to kind of get around a lot of it. If that means anything to the conversation.
Well, I also
here,
think
but-
that people can just understand Cartesian movements way more. Like there's like a mindset around the way those angular motions work in a 6-axis motion control. It's just a little bit outside of like the comfort realm for most, even like your experienced engineers. There's things that are going on there at the math level that is, some guy who's never done it before isn't going to just jump into it. But I can tell you, if I send a code for a 3-axis gantry to some guy who's never done any code whatsoever, he's going to sit down in front of that thing and he's going to teach himself how to fix
He's going
code.
to dig in and figure it out. Yeah.
It's going to be like that. Whereas we really count on like these Grasshopper translators or post processors to send the the kind of G code to the robot so that it actually is making the motion we want it to do. But it's really ABB or Fanuc or Kuka or Motoman or these other companies. It's what they're doing internally in their language that is kind of like the magic sauce that we don't really have access to. Nobody really has access to it except for the people in those organizations. So,
It's pretty in depth.
yeah.
Yeah, when I first came from 3-axis, 4 and 5-axis, like metal and woodworking machining, to the 6-axis, I was really unsure how to make it work, and Tim and Jonathan really helped make it. I just kind of trusted that okay, I'm going to be able to program 6-axis robots when it was really quite a brand new format I'd never seen before. So, once I got into it, it's actually not that difficult, but it's quite a bit to learn, even though no one piece is real.
Yeah.
Complex.
And we won't put a 6-axis robot in every project. We definitely will have customers who a Cartesian printer is going to do more than adequate work for them. So it's a complexity that you add when it's necessary.
Mm-hmm. Especially with 1K material, I would say. 1K and Cartesian, in my mind, they kind of go together. Whereas the 6-axis plus and the 2K stuff is really where you
Lets you print on different planes.
different planes, leaving the plane. Yeah, that's
We can do non-planar with Cartesian movements as well too. Like it's not like you're limited to that, but there's elements of kind of reaching into a place that you wouldn't normally be able to get to. And of course, Jim has a lot of experience with the 5-axis machines, which is what a 5-axis machine is basically standard Cartesian movements. It does start to dabble in the angular movements of things, but it's really it's still easy to get your head there because it's not everything moving in angular motion. It's like 3 motions that are really just like point A to point B, and then you have these extra angles put on, whereas the 6-axis stuff is,
The tricky part is like drawing a square with polar coordinates. It's just it's like an arbitrary challenge that's so simple with Cartesian coordinates, such a common shape.
Yeah. Because there's almost an infinite number of ways of getting there in 6-axis. In fact, John's always talking about event horizons, where we're trying to push the robot to a spot where the robot does not have
singularity.
anything. Singularity.
Event horizon.
It's close. It's like
It's almost the same
thing.
It's like, what are we going to do when we get there?
It's almost an infinite number of variables.
So what's this event horizon?
Well, it's generally when the thing is almost extended perfectly straight, and it has to do some kind of movement in and around here.
It could go this way or that way. It can't decide. So you have to kind of make it go around it. Avoid these singularities. Avoid these event horizons.
Oh, okay. So the printer, I guess, maybe because of the wiring, or just because of the way the joints are set up, it can't do many circles in a row. It can only do.
No. It's actually about the command structure of the 6 angles that the robot has to go through in order for it to actually be at that spot where it wants to be. It's basically what it's doing is it's trying to calculate the best path that it should take to do that thing, and it almost hits an infinitely equal number of ways of doing that path, and then it's screwed up. Whereas our Cartesian robot just goes where you tell it to go. That's it. Like you can't choose how it gets there.
Is that a G-code problem?
I think it's just the nature of the way the 6-axis work. You're kind of asking the wrong guys.
Yeah.
All I know is that we need to avoid singularities, which is where things could be going either way, but
they're going to cause an event horizon.
Something's going to explode.
We're going to get sucked into a black hole.
Okay. It is really hard to wrap my head around the 6 different joints moving at once, and I guess a Cartesian system. I built a 3D printer.
It's kind of funny. It makes like a shutter sound when it stops, eh?
I was trying to record 4K video, but because the SD card was having some issues, it wasn't recording consistently. Please excuse the brief pauses in sound while I fix cameras a few times throughout the podcast.
That's the
shutter
show.
basis.
It's actually like
Closing.
giving you like a cue though. It's cool. Otherwise you wouldn't know it.
This would be annoying in the audio from the other cameras.
This thing may shut off.
I thought it did shut off.
Oh really? There's no red light.
Do a quick check.
It's good, but I'll reset it.
Event Horizon. That's a new one for singularities.
Let me run to the restroom really quick.
Make a computer brain explode.
Where's the restroom?
On the left.
It's
Second
third
door.
door there. Yeah, totally. Yeah, I get some of my terminologies from watching too much Neil deGrasse
It's
Tyson
the
or
same.
something.
It's the same kind of feeling though when you're approaching it. Yeah. Oh no. Yeah. Yeah.
Man, he's definitely gonna have to go and do an interview with Tim so he can redeem himself for all this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope we're not
Just passing the
shining him in a bad light because he's brilliant. So.
Yeah. Kind of stoked to see that retaining wall finally get put in. Those
It's
parts
looking
were
really
sitting
good.
there for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really nice to see it happening.
It's definitely gonna need a coat of that stuff, eh? I was thinking about it, the fish sign. Can we? I don't know why we didn't yesterday. We had all that wet mortar, but I'd actually like to fill the crack the whole way with wet mortar, and then get somebody maybe with a
Yeah, we
toothbrush to fill that one crack,
Yeah, we should do that.
and then yeah, maybe before you gotta pick up the spark plugs for Sebastian, plugs and wires.
Okay.
There's an order waiting at Nordco, and then maybe go and pick up an extension so that we can
So we can drill it.
drill the rest of the
The
sign.
You guys ready for a beer?
Yeah, we can have a beer, sure.
Before they get warm?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, man.
Thank you.
One of the luxuries of doing this in person is I can convince you guys to drink with me.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Cheers. Cheers. Cheers.
So,
Little Grolsch.
how long do you anticipate before one of you is living in a 3D printed house?
Summer.
Yeah.
This summer?
Jim has
Summer
to.
coming up. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I don't have to, but that's the goal. I would really like to.
If he wants to keep his wife, he has to live in that 3D printed house by summer.
Your wife really wants a 3D printed house.
Well, wants a house. Yeah.
Just moved her into a 1907 wooden shack on the side of the hill for.
Yeah, we moved
Temporary and-
closer to the site there,
Yeah.
and it's an old, cold house with limited space.
Yeah.
So, creaky floors. Yeah, I'd really love to have something to live in this summer. Even considering doing some printing with the Tillicum this fall, if I can pull it off. Just like some landscaping. Did I try it out?
Did you see where his site is?
I don't think I
So
did.
Jim has that chunk of property that's like right behind the 40 by.
Just uphill.
From 40 by is what we refer to the R&D shop.
Mhm.
It's because it's 40 feet by 40 feet, which is an insanely small shop for us to be working in. Like
Very
as soon as
small.
the building was standing, like, what have we done?
Is your lot past that footpath with the bridge?
No, it's straight uphill from the workshop.
Okay.
Stone's Throw.
He's gonna have a
25
view of
meters.
the Fibonacci House basically. It's right uphill from that.
It's a great view.
Yeah, it's just uphill. Yeah. So we've actually had Selkirk College out there, and they've scanned it for us with their geoslam equipment. So just waiting for some processing to have a look at it and see some strategies for printing and get started.
Yeah, the bedrock printing that you guys are doing is really unique. So you took a 3D scan of some of the bedrock on the land near your facility, and I guess can you talk a little bit about how you made a model from that? For
I mean, it's actually quite a simple process once everything's in place, but there's a scan. There's a variety of different scanning methods out there. It was a LiDAR scanner that built our model. I don't know what the processing software was that created a mesh from those points or that data, but we took that mesh, Tim took the mesh and created parts that interfaced with it, and then sliced it and printed it.
This one's
For
kind of
example.
cool. It was in collaboration with the Selkirk College here, which is a local school in Nelson, and they're just trying to get their digital manufacturing department off the ground. So it's pretty nice for them to come out and bring some of their up and coming alumni, I guess, to get a feel for what's going on with this application. We also did it last year for the Big Five Dubai show. We presented that we were doing this. We call it topography optimization, because the big buzz in 3D printing, of course, is topology optimization. So we wanted to kind of play on that a little bit, but it's definitely a technique that is going to, I think, revolutionize building in hard to get at areas, or areas where access to excavation equipment or dynamiting is just not a really good or viable option. And it's far less intrusive also. Like it allows us to print in cool areas that it's not going to cause a lot of damage to the area.
So you said interface with it. Can you describe what that means in more colorful language?
Well, the interface, so you've got a rock that's raw, natural, it's broken, it's fallen apart with weather, it's eroded, and rather than try to... So the interface part is between that and a structure that we want to see or realize. So something to go between. So we'll print something that very closely matches the surface of the rock, and it has another feature that's also printed in it that can interface with the house or the structure or whatever it is we're trying to produce there.
So to build on that site without that interface, what would you have to do to the bedrock?
Well, the only thing that we have to do is, we clean it, we scan it.
Without
we drill
that process,
okay,
so what's the alternative?
Conventionally, conventionally you can do the same process with formwork. You can take plywood or form boards and you can scribe it and cut it and make it fit and seal it so that it won't leak. You can also blast it or sculpt the rock so that it's more favorable for the conventional forming and pouring techniques as well.
But it preserves by integrating the 3D model and printing something that fits exactly to the formwork of the rock. You're able to pre-print basically perfect formwork for the print with just a little bit of finesse when you're pouring the concrete in.
Yeah, I mean, so this week we tried to do like a really challenging surface, like one that had like a lot of shape to it.
Irregularities, topology.
And what came out of it was that we had to basically grind off a little bit of the scalloping effect you get from when, because we did only do 2.5D for that one. We didn't actually do a true 3D tool path, I don't think, or was there some varied bead thickness on that one?
No,
it was all 2.5D. So it basically means that like when the printer switches directions, you've got these spots where it almost creates like a little bit of a staircase. So we had to hit a little bit of that off with the grinder, and then it just
minor touch-ups to make it fit perfect.
Yeah, and you went with a 15 millimeter bead or 10 millimeter bead thickness on that one?
The height is 7.5.
Yeah, so
and the width is 32.
Okay, so it would have been 15 millimeters tall for each of its scallops, right? Because
for the return, double.
Which for that surface is a lot. We could probably done something. I think in hindsight, though, I'm pretty sure you can show pictures of that. We should have gone and done like a final true 3D pass on everything. But the scan that we got actually had a bunch of vacancies in it. The scanner.
There were some holes in the mesh that we received, so we patched them.
So we had to make some assumptions about some of the distances.
There were a couple of interference spots there, which we just ground off.
The whole project, all in, we're about maybe 6 hours worth of work, and there's the table stand in there pretty much now. So it was super fast to do it. It was kind of a rush project because Tim has to present to there's a kind of an elite architectural gathering called the Beam conference coming up. And so he wanted to make sure that he had some evidence to the claims. We've done a bunch of theoretical writing on this thing.
We've done some samples,
but we had to put proof
of concept here now. So, the idea that it's a small example, but to do a full house or a larger landscape project, that we can scan the entire thing and have dozens of parts or tens or hundreds of parts that are just brought to site, placed and filled. It's just.
So this is a classic example of how 3D printing is going to blow other industries out of the water to try to do comparative work. Right? This is something that is a unique application that only 3D printing can do.
How budget friendly is the scan?
Very. It's expensive. The equipment is not cheap. It's tens or hundreds of.
That's if you're running LiDAR, but pixel optimization starting to print gather, and you've got ways of getting 3D data that doesn't have to be expensive.
But the equipment's available, and the amount of time that you need that equipment is so short that the price comes down significantly. the guys came out from Selkirk there, and there was more talking and setup and discussion than there was scanning.
Yeah,
it was like
sure.
a 4-minute scan.
Like drone footage, you just put it up there. It's like 4 minutes.
So if it's $150 an hour to rent someone with the equipment, you can do a lot of scanning in that time.
That's a reasonable price. The equipment's like, I've seen Matterport has a LiDAR system for like $20,000.
Oh,
You can even mount it on one of the Boston Dynamics robot dogs, and then it'll do the scan for you.
Yeah. And you're not even getting into the Faro or the Leica ones for like under 80 or 100,000. So.
Yeah, that one's really high end.
Yeah.
So expensive equipment, but you don't need it for very long, and it's quite fast.
Mm-hmm.
But we think this technique is going to revolutionize home construction, at least in parts of the world like here in southern Germany, where Tim is, trying to build into the Alps or to build into the Rockies or the Himalayas. These places have really challenging build sites, and this technology is going to make it a lot more appealing for people to take on housing projects that may have been cost prohibitive to do it using conventional methods. So.
And once we bring the printer to the site there, and we're doing this live printing to the rock, that's the obvious next step for us.
Live printing to the rock. So the printer is live adjusting, like the bed is the...
That's not till next week, though. We're gonna finish.
Well, we'll bring the
bringing
bringing the printer to the site, however it is, whether it's moving or not while it's there. Even indexing, having the printer in one spot, reaching what it can, and moving and resetting up.
It's going to be challenging.
Well, we'll be able to
Sure.
we'll be able to print bigger things that we can't transport anymore as well, right? So
Yeah. It's an awesome debate. The in situ versus prefab printing has been. Some companies have clearly stated they're going to go one way, and other companies clearly the other way, and phenomenal results on both sides. We like to think there's the best
both,
application for both worlds,
Yeah,
so
sure
we'll
is, yeah.
continue to pursue both techniques for printing.
just like Cartesian and robot and Polar.
So for in-place printing, will you build a temporary structure around the printer?
That's going to depend on our materials and the site conditions. I mean, ideally we can do it in the rain, but there's a lot of challenges.
So you say ideally in the rain because
Well, I mean, ideally the technology can allow you to.
Okay.
Yeah,
Not that
we want to evolve the
but-
ability to get to that level.
Yeah, but I mean, for now, we have, conditions permitting, we can do it without covering.
You gotta treat yourself in some new SD cards, man.
Yeah, I don't know why took like 30 minutes of footage of the printer yesterday. I don't know.
Yeah. So ideally, we'll be able to print in situ with and without the coverings as necessary, depending on material. Site conditions.
Yeah, you'll be uniquely positioned to have the debate of in situ versus facility printing. I would imagine it's just going to be different pros and cons for each one.
I think so too.
Yeah. And I think it'll get back to the same argument. Are you doing something just for the sake of doing it, or are you doing it because of the added value or the added benefit? I think that's that's kind of the determining factor to everything apart from cost, right? Cost has always been the number one reason why people do anything of a certain style in any industry, whether it be construction or something else. But if you can create value added and the cost component to it is in line with that, then that's going to basically be the only way people will do things moving forward.
That's kind of a good segue to a philosophical question of why are you guys doing this?
Well, we want to change the world and have a good time at the same time. We want to improve things for everybody, ourselves and the others around us.
You've been out to Kootenay Lake Village, you've seen the space, and we thought that something that a place that cool required something done to it equally cool. So we kind of feel like there's an obligation to make some really awesome prints out there, some really cool architectural structures. But the reason why we got into it originally is because of our long history of digital manufacturing.
Yeah.
Jonathan and I were living in the Netherlands, and we both basically he quit, I got fired, and we had to move on to something new. And having a strong background in industrial machinery can apply to any industry. Just because we're working in wind energy doesn't mean that we couldn't try something else. And we looked at how the 3D printing industry was really at its infancy with this stuff, the construction level size machines that it was kind of a no-brainer for us to jump in. We got duped too. We thought you could build a house for $5,000 in 24 hours. I'm like, that seems like a good way to make some cash.
Let's give it a go, guys.
Let's give it a go. Yeah.
The more we look at it, the more reality sets
So
in.
the real frustration of all those phone calls is seeing yourself in the mirror a little bit.
We're polite. We know what it feels like to be that excited.
Yeah, and we're always listening, because sometimes these people who want these, inexpensive, cost-effective houses have really great ideas for how to implement it, or some angles that we haven't considered. So there's a lot to be learned by listening to these requests too.
Is there a mission statement?
In the company, I think we had one on our website from because we had like a first founders meeting. We all met in the Alps and sat down and decided what we're going to be as a company and how we want to represent ourselves. And it was fairly altruistic. We have quite a lot of ecologically minded people in the company. For me, one of the main things was I wanted to be able to give machinery to people they could design houses that require way less consumption of disposable furniture. That was kind of a weird little niche in there, but I just recently moved a couple times, and my daughters would drag me into IKEA and we'd buy this landfill, bring it into our house, and then try to move it, and it wouldn't move even once, and then it'd be in the landfill. And so I thought that, like, as a machine designer and a company with a philosophy around reducing the amount of landfill that goes out there, it was kind of the core I wanted in the mission statement. I don't know if it's there. There's definitely, Adam, our director of operations, is really big on affordable housing and trying to make sure that everybody has a safe, clean place to live. So that's in our mission.
Yeah.
But
well, ecologically sensitive too,
Yeah.
right? We want to do work with materials that are not bad for the environment. We're interested in geopolymers and insulation that's not spray foam. Really, that's
Spray
where we
foam
want
is
to go.
quick
Right?
and
Well,
convenient, but-
yeah, it's quick and convenient, but it's not good for the environment in the long term.
Yeah,
So,
that's good.
there's a lot of opportunities in 3D printing to expand the cavities and change things, so we can use other materials in larger volumes that are more friendly.
I like the way you put that of having an object and seeing it as a landfill kind of before its life has expired. Because you can kind of, certain objects you just know have a limited lifespan, especially if they're plastics or something like that. It's not meant to be something permanent, it's something disposable. So to have that foresight, at the end of the day, time is such a constant.
Have you never had that sensation when you're like walking around at Walmart that you're just walking around in a dump?
Yeah, well, that's
It totally
crazy
feels like I'm
because
just
you haven't
waiting for
even
the
thought it yet.
buzzers to circle around and like push me out of the way because they're trying to get it. Like
All the dump bears coming in.
The 75-pound bag of shrimp that's for sale, right?
I don't consider myself like super environmentally oriented, but it's definitely I like animals and I like nature and I appreciate the environment, so preserving it is important to me on that level. And I guess like plastics is something I really hate. So that's why I try to avoid being associated too much with 3D printing, because most 3D printing is done in plastics. And anything plastic is not something you want permanently. Like in a home, wood, metal, concrete even, these are things with a permanence.
Yeah. But we have to be honest though, every single thing humans do, there's a cost to it. And everybody knows that concrete is one of the major contributing factors to CO2 emissions out there. So we have a moral responsibility that if we're going to start introducing concrete into an area that maybe would have had a lower CO2 footprint from, say, using like stick or timber construction, that we're bringing some other kind of value added that will make it so that this thing does actually have a stronger environmental outcome or influence. And so Jim brought it up earlier, talking about the wall cavities side of things. If you were to try to make a house out of conventional stick construction and you want to increase your wall cavity to get your insulating properties, we actually require more timber. Whereas if you're doing a hollow wall construction on a 3D printed concrete, you're now actually able to build a larger structure, conceivably stronger, and it's using less concrete than, say, a similar construction would if it was made out of just conventional board. So in these areas, we can actually recognize how it is that our industry is perhaps being big turds to the whole planet, and kind of minimize how much of an impact it is.
Minimize and optimize things.
And like we definitely don't want to greenwash anything we're doing. We have to be very honest that the stuff we're doing does have an impact. But if we don't have it at our core values to constantly be working on how that impact can be better, then we're not in it for the right reason.
Yeah, I guess the reason I don't dedicate so much of my energy to those ecological things is because it's too difficult to really figure out where the problem is. Like, people will say that batteries from lithium-ion batteries are worse for the environment than the energy you're saving from gasoline or whatever, and the solar panels, the silicon or something is like terrible to mine. There's all these different explanations and reasons, but for printing, like you were saying, it's twice as strong and it's thicker and twice as strong. So if it's stronger, I don't know if you even said twice, but if it lasts twice as long and has 50% more emissions to build, the net result is less emissions because you have an object that's going to
outlive
We have to be careful not to pretend to be the experts in that math, though. Yeah. That's the thing. And there's a gazillion ways to slice things, and most of what you hear out there, somebody has an agenda before they set out to even do the math. So they've done the equations in a way to kind of paint the story that already backs them up. And so it may sound like we're doing a little bit of that as well, too, and I apologize if that's how we're coming off. But the goal would be that we actually genuinely are not necessarily recognize that we're better than those other things, but in the steps we're taking, that we are actively trying to reduce what our impact is. I mean, that's really all you can do. You see arguments all the time about whether green energy is truly green because what kind of damage does it do to flood a valley to make a hydroelectric project, or what damage are all of these wind turbine blades. They don't recycle very well.
Mining for resources.
But one thing's for certain, things that we do that are moving us collectively towards the direction of actually giving a shit about that is the right thing. Mm-hmm. So if these renewable energies are getting lambasted by people who are coming from a petroleum industry or conventional industries, then it's not necessarily about what's being accomplished, but the motivation of people who are doing the lambasting. And so that was always going to sort of sully the waters on what people believe or don't believe about what we're doing or what other industries are doing. So it's just, you can only just focus on what's in front of you.
I mean, one easy example is the formwork that can be eliminated. So if you have custom formwork that's going to be used once and then thrown out or disposed of, even if it's recycled, the energy put into recycle it and make it a reusable resource again is going to be huge. So to eliminate that entirely from the process, there's got to be a huge savings somewhere. I mean,
some things are obvious, right? Some things are a little bit more difficult to determine whether they're green or not. But for those kind of cases, absolutely. Take advantage of that.
Formwork is definitely a great example of how you can reduce waste. Like the visible waste, a lot of formwork does end up in landfill. But that's not to say there's other companies out there who are in the formwork business who have actually identified some techniques to reduce their waste. Yeah. So one of the major players in 3D printing right now is Perry because of their investment in Cobot, and they actually almost revolutionized some of the formwork strategies that have gone on in Europe because their formwork is lasting way longer than just the conventional sheets of plywood. So you can still, every party in whatever industry they're in can participate in
a reduction,
being less of an impact or having less of a detrimental effect on things. And so our core mission statement, whether it not be in line with a bunch of other organizations out there, it should still be comparable to what other organizations are trying to do because we all have a responsibility to not screw this up for the people who have to come after us.
Especially for your company, it seems like it's an insurance policy for an impending doom in the labor force. The construction labor force is smaller than ever, and there's a demand that isn't being filled, and that's made evident by all of the people who are trying to get work done, and they can't find the contractor, it's taking too long, or the contractor has too many other deals, they're too busy.
Never mind the shutdowns for pandemics that make it so low-cost labor who would normally travel into your country to bring money back to their families. They're not even able to come in and do that work anymore. So, definitely robotization is going to kind of smoothen the peaks and valleys of the construction workforce.
I don't even think it'll decrease the income that the construction workforce is getting because there's a load of demand that just goes beyond the supply, and at a certain point you can only charge so much for labor. And so I could imagine a world where maybe it just decreases the schedule and the amount of money that you see these contractors earning isn't going. I don't picture that decreasing. It's been increasing even through COVID. Construction bills and budgets are up more than they're expected and more than these months last year.
I think I agree with you 100%. I think you'd have to have a real economist sitting across from me at the table to actually say whether or not that's true. But it does kind of seem like, the work shortages that exist already were going to happen regardless of whether there's pandemic or other reasons that people can't get to the job sites. The thing that we hope digital manufacturing can contribute to the construction industry, starting with 3D printing, is that jobs finish on time and on budget. Because right now it does not seem to be that people give a shit about that, and it's actually insanely frustrating at how poor so many contractors are at predicting what the budget's going to be and what the time frame is going to be for them to complete. And so much overages are allocated towards just poor coordination of the tasks that have to happen in the order they happen. If you have a fleet of robots doing your work for you, I mean, it's a known commodity before you push play. They're going to.
If you know where they're going to start.
If your writer tells you it's a 3-minute and 47-second print, it's a 3-minute and 47-second print. If a contractor says, I'm going to have your shingles on next week,
you may or may not have the shingles on next week.
More likely they'll be on in 3 weeks, right? So
it's weird how it's so normalized for construction projects to be over schedule and over budget.
Yeah.
It's a lot of people use it as a strategy to win jobs by bidding low.
It's strange that there's such a tolerance for it. In wind energy, because I spent many years in wind energy, if we are over by a day on our deliverables, holy smokes, they would want to be heading. Right?
Penalties.
If we're affecting the shutdown of a production facility that has their mandatory throughput that they need to hit for their shareholders to see their quarterly earnings where they are in their projections, and we somehow contributed to that being off by 1.5%, we're hearing about it. But the construction industry, it's these guys are hitting 150, 200% of original budget and 150 to 200% of their time estimations, and everyone's like, well, that's the
and then
business.
they're on to the next contract. There's no shortage of work for these guys somehow.
Nobody's punished.
They're all doing it together.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's hard to blame them too, because there are a lot of unknowns when they get into these things, and it's what one person does on the site that can interfere with the other contractors, and it's not always.
I think it's a Schrodinger's cat thing. I think if you look at it, you're causing the problem.
There's so many excusable problems, and there's so many holdups. Like if the electrician doesn't come on the right day, then the carpenters can't board up the walls, and there's just so many there's so many logical explanations that I think that they just have this expectation that they can give excuses, and the excuses are, even some of the ones that aren't so serious are taken as a similar severity almost. And there's there really is an expectation that contractors will be over schedule and over budget. Yeah. It's so deeply ingrained in the system.
But there can also be BS. So we do have that timber frame structure that we built for our R&D shop, and we hired a local contractor to come in and do that. And I asked Jim just keep track of the hours when the guys show up and when they leave. And they were billing us for way more hours than they're actually there. And you challenge them on that, and they're like, well, we got out there where we realized we didn't have this material, and so we had to stop there. So even though our guys went home at 2, we had to charge for a full day because we scheduled a full day for us to be out there. And then you ask them, well, aren't you the ones responsible for getting the material out there? And he's like, yeah, but the thing is, the guys at the shop, they didn't have any. And somehow they can always pass their errors and their inabilities down onto the final customer, so that everybody in the chain gets paid what they're supposed to get paid, except for the final customer who pays way more than they should have, and they waited way longer than they have to. And maybe it sounds a little bit disgruntled around this subject, but we hope that digital manufacturing construction industry smartens all these guys up a little bit, because they totally deserve to make a fair wage, and they totally deserve to actually feed their families and have good lives and buy themselves boats and skidoos or whatever they want to spend their money on. But you got to get there through honest means. I mean, in every other industry, staying on budget and staying on time is essential for those people to get paid. Why is the construction industry not functioning in that domain? I don't really understand. So
there was one example I learned when I was at Spearhead, and we were ordering glue lamps 40, 50 feet long. And when they arrive, they're 1-2 feet longer than they need to be, so we have space. And we had this one guy from Bavaria who started working with him, and he's like blown away that there's that much excess. And he says in Europe, anybody who's working on margins that allow an extra foot or two of a glue lamp is not competitive, and they won't get the contract. So they're working on much tighter margins and less excusability, it sounds like, over there than we are here. You know, they would have one or 2 inches of extra, and he just couldn't understand why we order these glue lamps that are a foot or 2 over, and then they show up incorrect, and we still order from the same company again. Whereas he said back home they would never ever go back to that company again for a mistake like that puts them out.
But that's not just Bavaria, that's Europe as a whole.
Yeah.
Or at least the majority of the economies in Europe are functioning on, make sure that
Tighter margins.
you've understood what it is you're setting out to do before you agree to doing it.
There's less allowance for excuses.
Yeah.
For passing the buck, so to speak.
I wonder what government regulation leads to that kind of mentality.
I don't know, is it government?
I don't know, yeah, I would almost say it's more
Capitalism.
capitalism. Yeah,
Capitalism.
well, people want their
Yeah.
value for their money, right? And so they're just a little bit more expecting.
Yeah, I mean, my instinct is that somebody who would order an extra foot, in the past, there was an issue where they needed an extra 6 inches, and so that extra 6 inches may have cost days of the schedule, being a much more costly problem than just buying the extra foot. And so that's probably the logic that person made when they kind of ordered an excess, and I think that's traditional logic.
But it should be by decision, not by default. You should be deciding that you're doing that. It shouldn't be by accident that that's happening.
I think it's also, in this particular instance, it's the manufacturer of the glue lamp likes to go to even increments. So we go up to the next increment, and it makes their production more streamlined than keeping track of which was an inch or 2 longer. They've got them all at 40 feet, whereas, rather than keep track of which one's 39'6". Anyway.
I would be interested to see some study that is like a top-down. I've never comparatively looked at the construction industry of Europe versus America.
They're way ahead of North America.
It sounds like it, yeah.
Especially in prefab with it's up north. They have some incredible prefab and insulation innovations that are like super cutting edge.
You definitely got to go over there. We're worlds apart. I mean, we are a Dutch company, and we actually count on the reputation that the Netherlands has for, being strong in this area for our relationships in the Middle East and South America and places like that. Not that people have a problem with North American standards, but for sure there's a sort of understanding that there's leeway that maybe is a lack of efficiency. So, yeah. So we're trying to hold ourselves to European standards, even in our North American work, and we're not trying to insult the way business is done around here at all.
It's just a fact that I've seen it.
Yeah.
There's a little bit more allowance here for delays and budget.
Yeah, I don't know if we talked about this in our other podcast, but I think a lot of the innovations that Europe, especially Northern Europe, is so good at achieving in construction stem from their short construction window. Because of the frost line in the winter, they have to build quickly when it's warm enough. So by doing prefab, sometimes in a facility, modular units, they're able to fit those kind of short construction frames. And Canada has the same problem, right?
Yeah. Norway is actually warmer than Canada. Most people don't realize that. So we actually have some of the most wintry world. It's basically us and Russia that has as much winter as we do. And so we do actually have very short building time frames here as well. I think the big difference is we have an enormous amount of access to resources. So Europe, they've had actually, they have a horror story of colonization because basically their products and whatever resources they had available to them was really strained by the dense population that they had to go outside in the world. Whereas Canada, we have such an enormous amount of resources here. People can be wasteful. They can ship an extra foot of timber on their lambs because whatever. There's like millions of acres of untouched forest. So they'll just go lop more trees down, and nobody really pays for that stuff genuinely because it's going on government land or it's going into like a resource management strategy that's highly subsidized by our government. So
the labor is more expensive than the materials for sure.
So the efficiencies I think you see in Northern Europe, definitely weather is one of them, but I think it's more of a lack of resources, immediately available resources that has made them have to become much more efficient. They also build with a mindset that's different than ours. So, you know, like Canada as an experiment as a country is, you know, barely 180 years old. There's not a whole lot of structures that have been here for that entire 180 years. Whereas Europe, like, you know, families, young families living in 400, 500-year-old structures are, like, there are thousands upon thousands of those structures over there that are still serving the purpose. And so they can stomach a little bit more investment in their structures because they know that structure may very well be standing there for hundreds of years.
There's some bias to that though, because the ones that didn't last 400 years aren't there anymore to.
True.
That's
Yeah.
pretty good.
True.
But I would tend to say that they're thinking about the possibility it's going to stand that long. And
Yeah.
they may try to
A
achieve
lot less generational thinking in North America than there is in Europe.
That's the sad part about 3D printed construction for me. I might never get to see a 100-year-old 3D printed house.
Well, how old are you now?
24.
You're going to live to 124. You can come stay at ours. It'll be there in 100 years. For sure.
Sure. Will you guys greet me?
Maybe a virtual
Yeah.
greeting. Yeah.
Upload ourselves to the touch screen that will replicate your water. Yeah. Jim will probably sprinkle my ashes in one of the outhouses out there or something. So.
That's a unique thing to talk about.
Oh, does it?
No, you guys have your facility and it has its own, the STFU and the WTF. Can you talk a little bit about that?
The
The sewage treatment filtration unit, and then the water treatment facility. STFU and WTF.
So, how many units could you build on the land your facility's on?
We have enough water treatment right now for about 1,100 doors. The sewage treatment facility could probably handle about a quarter of that, but it's quite easy to build other sewage facilities around there. Yeah.
So there's huge scalability from a real estate development perspective.
Yeah. It's about 400 acres, of which probably 250 to 300 will be set aside for just green space and mountain bike trails, snowboarding, skiing in the winter, like access by foot. I don't think we'll ever put a chair.
It's a big part of community living out here is
But
green space.
yeah, it's about 1.5 kilometers of waterfront, so we can do some really nice public domain stuff down on the water. So it's a really great opportunity to really give 3D printing a backdrop that's just a little bit more exciting than, say, industrial parks in Copenhagen or places in the middle of nowhere where the permitting allows for experimental structures to go on. You know, we got a little bit of we're a little bit lucky on that one. That our competition doesn't get to utilize as easily. So
Yeah, to already have utilities in for thousands of potential units, that's pretty cool. It's pretty
Yep.
unique.
There's a lot to look forward to,
yeah.
for sure, in our future here.
Mhm.
What are
It's
the-
just one
That's
node.
just one
It's just one
location.
node too. Yeah. It's
Yeah,
just one
well, we're
space.
looking at places in the Netherlands for building like multifamily structures. We're looking at places in Dubai. There's a bunch of, I guess, pies and a bunch of different ovens on
Yeah.
how this can.
All completely different backdrop settings, conditions, right? You know, we're talking about in situ versus you know, in a controlled environment. You know, these kinds of challenges we're taking on here. We're considering, you know, we're thinking about taking this elsewhere too. Right? All the environments in the world. Soft again.
Both of them stopped actually, so you probably missed like most of that
Good
conversation.
thing the laptop's still going. The green light means it's good.
Oh, okay, you can see that. I was trying to like hit the touch screen so it would.
This one's might be dead.
Do you need?
Oh, you have to open it and
How's
close
your
it.
parking?
There you
I saw you're parked out there. You got somebody.
go.
I just see the guy there.
Archie, are you taking care of Jim's parking as well?
No, mine's fine. I'm in a 2 hour.
Oh, okay.
I was worried about. I just saw the guy and I was thinking about Ian's vehicle. So.
Okay, thank you.
Parking here is 3.5 times cheaper than a ticket in Philadelphia.
Can I talk to you about something I have a real bone of contention with? I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's your generation or the generation before you. They started using times to represent things that are smaller, whereas we always work with fractions. And when something is
A third.
a third of the cost,
But what if
not
it's 3.5
3
times?
cheaper.
You want me to say a seventh or no, 2? What would it
Whoever
be?
says 3.5. People say things are 2 times cheaper, 10 times cheaper. So no, it's a tenth of the cost. I don't know. I have these things that annoy me. People use the word literally way too often. It drives me crazy. and
The figurative use of
the times smaller thing.
That one bothers me too, literally using that improperly. Because the words have such specific meanings sometimes, especially that one.
Yeah.
And to use it not literally is
Yeah.
something about it.
Drives me nuts. Anyway, so there you go. So what were we talking about? Something being.
It's funny for you to say that with the skater spirit, though, because I think a lot of the people who use literally like that are, some of them, there's a fraction of them that are intelligent enough to know that it's improper and use it anyway just to be rebellious.
I think they're trying to sound smarter than they actually are. Or they're trying to fill the room with their own voice so they don't get interrupted. That's why I use the word literally incorrectly.
A lot of reasons why I think some people don't even realize they're doing it.
Yesterday, during the election coverage, some newscaster said, I was literally shocked by this. I was like, oh man, I hope somebody goes and tases them right now.
Was it one of you who mentioned when you see LOL in a statement or comment or something?
Not me.
Not me.
No.
Nope. It was Jonathan.
I don't know, similar, along the same lines. Yeah, if you see a comment that ends in LOL, just like instantly not taken seriously.
Yeah. I have actually all of the like abbreviations. Like when grown men use the letter U instead of YOU. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Being adults.
2 extra letters, come on.
I don't know if this is a sign or not of the future, but I have a 12-year-old brother who texts with immaculate grammar. He just writes every word out completely. I think it might be because with his generation, they had a full keypad. So like my first cell phone was a flip phone, and I had to text by like pressing the buttons 4 times. So there was huge added benefit to just writing U instead of YOU.
Yeah. I remember that.
Maybe
you're not saying your little brother's got integrity. You're saying he's got the tools he needs to do the job.
Maybe one, maybe the other.
I think basically we just need to collectively agree to never let your generation ever have any roles in leadership and just go to the next generation.
But we're the ones who really saw the transformation from pre-internet to post-internet and like regular phone to iPhone.
I ran a BBS in the 90s.
I think you guys are the first real internet generation. Yeah. We were the ones that had it inserted into our lives.
You saw it before any of the really, like you didn't grow up with a home computer.
Sure we did.
I did too.
Yeah.
A Tandy 1000.
Yeah.
And a Commodore VIC 20 actually.
Yeah. So we had also a Tandy 1000.
Yeah.
Which was an Apple IIe clone, right? It wasn't actually
an IBM.
No, it wasn't IBM. It was like
IBM.
an Apple IIe clone. Was it IBM clone? Whatever. We got to see internet show up in our lives. Like it wasn't something that we were born into. So, but that doesn't mean that we don't think that like your generation is going to have some great contributions for sure.
I mean, either fortunately or unfortunately, they already have. The millennial generation. That's Zuckerberg. That's Instagram founder. That's Snapchat. A lot of the biggest new companies are from leaders from my millennial generation, unfortunately or fortunately. There's a lot of dispute against the things they're doing. I guess The Social Dilemma is a popular movie right now. Mm-hmm. How does 3D printed construction fit into the big tech world?
Yeah, that remains to be seen. I think that the most exciting part right now is obviously the BIM. And everybody talks about Revit, the Autodesk version of BIM, but there's a lot of startup companies out there that are coming up with some really cool stuff. And I mean, we are obviously involved in big tech from the standpoint that we can't operate any of our machinery without the evolution of everything that goes on in computer science. But the notion that somehow or other things that you make in the field will instantaneously be translated back into the computer model is a really exciting time for construction. Mm-hmm. And I think 3D printing might actually be the leader in that technology. I think that we're going to have our sensory arrays on our robots that are actually teaching the rest of the people on a project what the actual real world model should look like. And so the BIM will be updated to represent empirical values that we're getting from our sensory array. So
I love how you got through all of that without using the word data, which is really big data is what it's getting at, but it's definitely unique to construction because the level of data and like specifics on how much concrete was flowing out of the machine, you can get like a number in liters if you want. Mm-hmm. And so to have that kind of accountability throughout the project is something kind of new that it's bringing to the table.
Big data is only as good as the things that are willing to actually analyze that data and give it, utilize it. So, for that example of how much concrete's gone through the machine, that actually may or not actually be relevant to anybody who's downstream who's going to be affected by that. But should it be that our bead width that was targeted to be at 59 millimeters is now 63 millimeters, and your plumbing holes that were going to be here now need to be offset by all of that, that would be usable data that would actually be of value to them. So you don't want to overload your BIMs with a bunch of information that is
useless.
Useless.
Will not affect change later.
What's up?
No, my car doesn't need it. I'm in 2 hours.
Sorry. Oh, I got a ticket.
Oh, I got one.
Your car?
My car, I think, is next to Ian's, but it should have 2 hours from when I got here on it.
Sorry,
So
Okay.
one thing I saw.
Let's take it out of your
talking
paycheck.
about tickets here are pretty cheap. I've gone with the ticket route instead of the paying route, and it comes out cheaper. I've seen where some of these projects at Spearhead, the entire project is based on the concrete. I mean, everything's built on the concrete, footings, foundations, or whatever. And one of the things we would do is we would send somebody to the site to go recon and see exactly what happened after the concrete was poured. And never, ever has it ever been exactly to the design, which the rest of the project is based on. So there's an evaluation, there's recording, and then there's an adjustment.
The as-built.
Yes, the as-built. The as-built is definitely used by the company Spirit to adjust for the future trades that have to come in and work with it. So
It's an interesting
the
aspect.
sooner you do it, the better off you are.
A lot of people don't understand in that aspect of construction, maybe similarly to those who don't get involved with the scheduling, is the finished product is almost never the same as the design. So a lot of companies that have a big project going on will get a separate set of papers, architectural papers for the as-built, as opposed to the design. That's just a crazy thing that I think people that aren't accustomed to it maybe would be a little mind blown that you don't always get kind of what you're buying.
Well, the tougher part of it is procurement. So there will be people who have long lead items for the elements they need to go next in the line, and say that the entire concrete slab is 1% undersized. You may have a whole bunch of elements that are actually too long, and someone's going to have to go back and cut all those things because there's no way that they could have gone back fast enough in the procurement chain to reorder the size before the elements would have needed to ship by. So
And that's exactly the type of the use of the reconnaissance of going and measuring it so that you can get the notice to everybody as soon as you can. That's why they were so good at project management because they would let everybody know what was going on with the adjustments as the project could proceed.
Even though you focus on 3D printing, Spirit Timberworks is a phenomenal digital manufacturing for construction industry. Maybe we can try to secure you a quick visit with them.
Yeah, that could be cool.
Yeah.
Where are they located?
Here.
Halfway to our site.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be great.
Mm-hmm.
Will they
See
have
what we
a
can do.
manufacturing facility where they're doing automated cutting? And
They do, yeah.
Big, beautiful houses.
yeah, I'd like to just kind of segue into other automation construction stuff. I would definitely pursue that kind of thing. I want to try to stay a little bit focused on 3D printing for just until maybe this is an unrealistic goal, but just until I reach every company.
Yeah.
They're growing and there's more of them constantly, but
You can film an interview and release it in months if you had to. Something like that.
Just some to show the interface between
Certainly.
3D printed elements and the other.
Well, because we are going to collaborate with them as much as possible.
Mhm.
We already recognize there's no point in 3D printing a concrete truss. Right?
Yeah.
Even though we can, we have the technology, we know the know-how to make a concrete truss.
Yeah.
Why would we?
from a design perspective too, I think since you're already using concrete for the 3D printing, it's nicer to use some wood or other materials.
Yeah, well, the hybrid approach I
Mixed
think
medium
is
looks nice.
absolutely the way to go, I think,
Mhm.
at this point right now. All the materials have different strong points and weak points.
Has your wife given any input to the design of the house you plan on printing?
Absolutely, we talk about it often. Not so much the technical details, but more about the space and what we need in a house and general design.
I've heard that and this is another example of Ian might not like, of me kind of just spitting facts out, but I heard that women are responsible for 80% of the buying decision for homes. So
Don't tell my wife that. I showed it to her on Google Earth.
and so it's important, I guess, that if 3D printed homes are going to become a big product with a wide market reach, that it's something that women find appealing. And I guess maybe, I hope I'm not being sexist in saying that like cold hard concrete generally doesn't have a huge female appeal, but I guess what are some of the preferences that she stated that she would like to see in a house?
Well, definitely that it would be hybrid. Definitely we want to break it. It's interesting. She mentioned that wood is essential, or something softer to contrast the concrete. I'm sure is going to be a big part of it. It's also economics too, right? We don't want to necessarily print everything because it's not really, it doesn't make a lot of financial sense to do that. So a hybrid approach. Insulation's a big deal. Maintenance of the structure afterwards. I guess the common things. My partner's actually a carpenter, a red steel carpenter. So she's got a lot of really useful insight.
What's a red seal? What's that mean?
Carpenter, that would be a journeyman.
It's Canadian lingo.
Red seal must be something to do with the certification process, because you can have a red seal chef, carpenter. I think it would be more trades related rather than
Step up from
academic.
apprentice. I'm gonna run to the restroom again.
Yeah, take a break.
This went down the wrong part.
A lot of topics to cover here.
And one more beer each. I feel like there's infinite topics. I could talk about this with you guys for like 8 hours if we ended up doing that.
Yeah, it's so hard to know whether or not these conversations feel contrived or not. It's not like
What
we
do you mean?
prepared for them, but
Well, that's what I like
cameras
about
cause people to
preparing.
behave different. You know, like you're conscientious of perhaps maybe someone coming back on you and saying, "Hey, you
Yeah.
guys are recording of you saying this."
Yeah.
And so
It's
you're
not recording right now, really, except for from there.
So I kind of feel a little bit guarded. I feel I
Yep.
don't want to have it
Sometimes,
seem
yeah.
like our answers are prepared. I mean, it's just stuff that we've thought about.
Your
a lot.
answers aren't prepared.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
there's
but-
objectives and things that
Yeah.
we're trying to achieve in business and stuff that we don't really want to like poo-poo on.
You don't-
Or, you don't want to like.
You don't want to
close
broadcast
doors or-
anger. You don't want
Yeah,
to broadcast like for sure. We've seen things in the industry that we think is pathetic. Can't talk about any of that without necessarily ruffling feathers of people who
Yeah,
might be your allies in the future.
It's not really a gentleman's activity to
No.
put people down or anything like that either, right?
No,
So-
but it's really funny because Jim and I actually had, I'd say, almost like a kind of a mini falling out a long time ago, because when we were designing these skateboards back in the day, there was this one particular truck manufacturer. Trucks are like the axles go hold the wheels
Yeah, I
on.
used to skate. back in
Okay.
the day.
Anyway, so he was making an inferior product with dimensions that were not like normal dimensions, and so we had to make our boards that wanted to use those trucks, because they were the number one selling truck at the time, have intentionally misdrilled holes so that when people bought those trucks and put them on our boards, they would mount perfectly.
Yeah.
And I went publicly, and I made kind of like this guy and his crap, and I hope somebody dethrones him or whatever. And he was like, "What are you doing?"
Against Jim?
This Jim?
No.
No.
He wrote the article.
I wrote the article.
and
It wasn't an
it's like-
article. It was like everything was PHP
Yeah.
databases back then.
Yeah.
These online forums where you could kind of track a bunch of different conversations at once. And they're public. A lot of them were anonymous.
Yeah.
I wasn't anonymous in this one. So I made this kind of public accusation that this guy's stuff
this
is
guy-
garbage. He shouldn't be
He
number
couldn't get his
one.
holes lined up. His hole spacing was irregular.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was like, why? Just make a product that makes people's stuff work. So it wasn't a huge falling out.
But it was just.
But it was,
an
we're talking about
example.
how you can have this relationship with the public that can very easily go down a path that you didn't think was going to go down, when I thought my intention was like, hey, maybe if we say this out loud, he'll actually make a better product, and our customers will have something they even appreciate more because we weren't doing it. So, but beyond that, what Jim did is he went and started his own truck company and made the best trucks on the planet for years, and not just dethroned this guy, but completely,
16 gigs.
completely changed what people expected a skateboard truck to be able to do. So he's talking about how the quality of equipment was, like, he moved it from here to here from
I moved it from
outside.
cast to machine.
Yeah, so it wasn't about holes anymore, it was about everything. Yeah, actually, I kind of felt bad after the last one that I didn't offer more editing, because that was kind of the one that sort of pushed the agenda to like use some mixed footage. And
You guys did
walk
all the
around.
editing. What do you mean?
Well, but it was meant. I told her to just do a rough cut. So it was his thing. Don't try to like
That was perfect. though.
micromanage what the thing should look like. Just get it so it all lines up, and then he can do what he wants with it. You know.
I didn't do anything.
Yeah, and it was pretty obvious to me afterwards that when it goes straight to us, like, can you hear us? Like,
Even the Zoom calls I do, podcast episodes, sometimes it'll start like, "Can you hear me?
yeah.
Your camera's not on."
Yeah, it's people use that. They're used to it, right? But
At a certain level too, it's a shield from people who aren't that interested.
mm-hmm.
Somebody who's maybe just has surface level intrigue, or I don't know, it forces it to only be accessible to those who are really interested and willing to sift through the rough cut stuff. You get the gems. Because I really think there are, in a lot of the podcast episode and the one I did with you guys especially too, you talk about a lot of stuff that's kind of like it's almost like a textbook of knowledge. And so, I don't know, it to some level it just wouldn't be fair to just give all your best secrets out at the surface level.
Mm-hmm.
Like if people are really interested, they kind of have to dive in and get the details.
Makes sense.
Well, nice thing about this industry is that secrets today are not secrets tomorrow. You know, there's a lot of new stuff to learn in the days and weeks and years coming ahead.
And there's marketing value in exposing some of them.
But there is an old expression that says "loose lips sink ships," and we're definitely known for having loose lips. So hopefully we're not like
Hopefully not sinking ships, but
yeah.
I don't think so. I don't think we are. I think there's so much we're chasing right now, and so much innovation to pursue that it's old news almost as it happens.
There's different schools of thought with that.
Yeah.
A lot of the challenges we're facing, we couldn't even get into them in any depth in this kind of format anyway. So even when we're having our own tech meetings, like someone has to take over the screen and put some calculations up or put some diagrams up so that we can all kind of be on the same page. It doesn't work in sort of just like a conversation format. So, yep. But
And
we have a weekly tech meeting, we have a weekly sales meeting, we have a weekly operations meeting where the whole staff, no matter what time zone they're in, we all have to. So sometimes Jim and I are getting up at like 5 in the morning so that we can do these meetings.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're surrounded by really, really smart people, and that helps us to really try out like kind of abstract techniques for some of the stuff we want to do, whether it's the mechanical side of things, the print strategy, or whether it's about even just like our business organization. You know, we're trying different things out so that we can kind of appeal to kind of a new unknown market that, it's there waiting for us, but it doesn't look like anything anyone's ever seen before. So we have to keep adapting our self-image so that we can actually fit into the role we're supposed to play.
A lot of the stuff we've talked about kind of revolves around the issues in the existing construction industry. And it really does seem so ripe for change. That's like, I guess, substantiates a lot of what you're saying now about how it's so exciting and there's so much opportunity. There's so many different routes you guys could take in the next 5 to 10 years, and it's great that you've kind of stayed open to different concepts. What do you think the most important catalyst would be for growth for Twente Additive Manufacturing, but also the printed construction industry as a whole? Is there some kind of...
I think it's acceptance by the construction industry, by the financial industry, everybody. Yeah.
But they're only going to accept us when we knock it out of the park.
Yeah.
So
they're going to need to see an example or examples.
It's not a chicken and egg thing. There really does need to be some amazing things done before the acceptance is going to be, widespread or mainstream?
Right now, it's very much early adopters, and it's a space dominated by exploratory endeavors to some degree.
Yeah, I think even we talked about early adoption in our original podcast. I think we're actually pre-adoption, because when we were talking about it before, I think we were kind of really like self-analyzing, and we were part of the bigger 3D printing construction industry.
Yeah,
But it is so nothing compared to the construction industry.
you're very right about that, and it's kind of like when Thomas Edison knew that he could heat up a wire and make a light from a bulb, but still needed to make like 100 different models till one was lasting or sustainable, whatever. It's almost in that phase where like the first edition's been made and just figuring out how to fine tune it and get to that fine product.
Yeah.
Well, it's also all the minds out there too, right? Because there's a small number of people working in this industry, and there's brilliant people all over the place. So once they start to focus on this stuff, that's when I think things are really going to.
It's kind of cool because it's a super small circle, but we kind of can tell that we're surrounded by future billionaires. Like there's so much growth potential in this industry, and so we're hanging out with these guys in these chat forums, or because there hasn't been very much in actual in-person symposiums. So the people that we're seeing, these guys are like first-year grads or undergrads, and they're developing techniques for inserting RF into wet 3D printed concrete. And this guy is going to be he's going to be running his own billion-dollar company in like 5 or 10 years from now. And there's like a whole sea of potential of these guys out there, and it's kind of cool because it is pre-adoption. It's not early adoption. It's really like the guys who are jumping in now are going to be having a major influence on how this industry looks in a few years.
I get that same feeling when I'm doing these podcasts. I feel like I'm talking to future billionaires, and like that's really a big part of my motivation for doing these, is because I think that down the line, when this industry takes off, it's going to be so cool to have an insight into kind of where people's minds were in the beginning, and like what people were thinking about before it really took off in the pre-adoption phase. And it's such an exciting like place to be in right now. It's like the first Tesla Roadster, or like the first light bulb from the Edison. I really hope that that I can keep developing like a catalog of of what's happening, and like hopefully I can kind of document the process as you were talking earlier about like a singularity point, like something like that.
Event horizon.
I think the event horizon is when you can make a single family home cheaper 3D printed than a regular home anywhere in, I guess, the world potentially. It's easy for me to just say America, but there's a lot more companies, or there's a lot more countries to benefit from this tech than just America.
Well, we already know that can be done. It's just, would that house be something that you would want to own or live in? That's the part we have to cross.
Yeah, bit higher value.
Yeah.
It seems so inevitable. Like, there's nothing specifically that would stop that goal.
It does. Yeah.
No, there's just too much.
Everything's going in the right direction.
Yeah.
It's all like everything's lining up for it to happen. So
The velocity is increasing, and maybe even the acceleration is increasing too, as more companies kind of like every time someone buys a printer, that's a whole nother group that's going to be devoted to making designs and testing prints in a different region.
yeah, it's like everything that has exponential growth is almost impossible to imagine. Like when you're at like the one or the two.
Yeah.
You ever remember that thing where someone offers you, a penny? Like you have to, they'll give you like $100 or $1,000, but you got to give them a penny today, and then tomorrow 2 pennies, and the next day 4 pennies, and the next day. And everybody gets duped in on that one because they don't understand what exponential growth is. But by the 30th day, it's like I can't
Penny's
remember
$1
the
billion.
numbers. Yeah.
If you double a penny every day for 30 days, it's like $1 billion at the end of it. Or like $1 trillion or some crazy amount.
I don't know about 30 days, but I think you have to go a little
Hold on, let me grab my calculator. Let's see. I think you're right. It's
2 to the power of 30, right? So 2 to
might
the
be
power of
$1.
30 minus 1. And that's how many cents you have.
Well, let's just do 0.01 times 2.
Let's do this calculation.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12,
There's a function
13,
on your
14,
calculator to do
15,
that
16,
for you.
17, 18, 19, 20. 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, not even close to $1 billion.
No, 10,000. You got
10 million.
10 million
10 million
pennies.
pennies.
No, $10 million because I put in 0.01 to start.
Oh, okay.
So now 4, 5, 6, 7. So it takes 37
37 days
days
to get $1 billion.
from a penny that doubles every day. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that this technology is doubling every day, but it's definitely doubled in. I would say there's probably twice as much printed concrete this year as there was last year, and maybe twice as much the year before that. Is that? It's a rough estimate.
Honestly, that's a crazy number. I'd say
I
more
have
than
no
that.
idea.
More.
Yeah.
I'd say there's more than double from the year last year. There is
I would
obviously
think so.
there's this elephant in the room, and that's wind sun, and they are operating on a scale that's not like all the other companies. But it's obviously a government-funded operation that has a very large resource set that allows them to do a lot of experimentation. They focused on prefab only, so that's going to make it so that they're going to offer a certain knowledge base to the industry as a whole. But yeah, they've done. I think when I went and met Henrik from Kobod the first time, he told me there was, I think, 66 3D printed buildings in the world at that time, and 60 of them, or 59 of them, were in China. So
That momentum probably hasn't slowed down.
No, I mean, didn't they just like print like a retaining wall for an ocean beach?
Yeah, that's a cool project.
So
I believe Cobod did a similar project in Florida.
I haven't seen that yet. The applications have not even they haven't even been imagined yet.
It's like a tip of the iceberg kind of thing.
Yeah, but it's like the tip of an iceberg compared to Greenland, right? There's a bunch of ice that hasn't even fallen into the ocean to turn into icebergs yet. So, no, it's definitely, we're on the cusp of something huge here. A true event horizon. That's good to attack his shit in your podcast. You just call it the lamest event horizon ever.
It doesn't seem lame to me because construction is like the 3 biggest industries. It's like the construction equipment, construction materials, construction labor, independently are like 3 of the biggest industries. So it's a huge, it's a huge challenge and battle. I really am. I think a lot about when it will become a threat to the existing construction methods. And right now, you don't see anyone really fighting hard against printed construction because it's not threatening to them yet. But once it starts replacing traditional techniques, that's when I think we'll see some pushback. What do you think that might look like?
Well, it kind of reminds me of when I was learning CAD in the 90s, and I saw a lot of architects and designers and stuff still working with paper.
The light board, the light table?
Yeah, with their, I should really know the names of these things, but the drafting table, right?
Yeah.
With compasses and squares and things like that. So, I mean, I even had to do a course for BCIT as a prerequisite for CAD, which I ended up just dropping out of because I was learning way faster on my own than in the school, but I had to do drafting, and I see a lot of the people that I don't see a lot of people drafting with paper anymore, and they've had to adapt or drop out. So I don't know what's going to happen with the construction industry, but I think we're going to see the same thing. They're either going to adapt, or they're going to have some kind of prestige as a designer or whatever, that they're still not using this stuff. I don't really know what's going to happen. But
I imagine it'll be something truly epic, like an epic battle of the old system versus the new system. At some point, there should be some climax of the.
Well, the consumer is going to decide, right?
True.
Who's going to hire who? Are you going to hire the guy who's using it or not using it? And there's going to be a lot of cases where people will continue to use the old style for whatever reasons.
Construction is one of the places where the consumer usually doesn't get to decide, though.
I mean, when I say consumer, I mean whoever's paying the bill for the projects. That could be governments. That could be.
That's true, and especially
if
the 3D printed house is going to look much different than a regularly built house, the consumer will have a lot more say in that situation. But traditionally, it's been aluminum framing versus studs versus wood studs.
Yeah.
And that's like a decision that most 90% of consumers don't really.
No, they don't really participate in that decision. Best developers, contractors,
Building code.
building code will be a big influence. Yeah.
If there's, I guess something I was kind of bringing up how I think there might one day be a climax of the battle between the traditional construction methods and the new automation construction methods. If that were to happen, where do you think it might manifest?
I don't think the traditional guys will even notice it happened. There'll just be a bunch of guys running around on their shop floor with laptops, and like, oh my god, I don't understand what any of these kids are doing. They won't see it coming. They really won't.
But they already have so many structured systems like unions to be able to collect their resources and collaboratively communicate a message. So the ability to do that leads me to think that some kind of conflict is inevitable.
I don't know. I
They-
think
well,
it's creep. I think it'll be technology creep. I don't think that there'll be like a bunch of robots banging at the door saying, "Let us in. We have equal rights to the laborers."
Yeah.
You know, it's just going to be that they're just going to start showing up in different places, and people will have to learn to adapt to these new things that are showing up. You do definitely hear some anti-roboticization rhetoric from unions, for example, or labor. Ministries responsible for labor tend to throw some like unresearched statistics out there about how automation is affecting the ability to earn in their economies.
Not many economists have.
There's not a lot of science
automation.
behind
They don't,
a lot of these claims, right? It's there's like a fear that's been introduced into the conversation that isn't backed by fact, and they haven't really been able to find much evidence of how anything from the automation industry has really had a massive detrimental effect on people's earning capabilities for any regional or even national economies. The biggest issue that people have with ability to earn has been attrition, skill set attrition. Always, find a good mason these days is like finding gold in rivers has been getting panned for hundreds, and if not thousands of years. Like the stuff's going away. There's very little of it left. People don't want to have a 10-year learning cycle to have a skill set that makes them in the high earning category. They want to get there quickly. So nobody wants to become a cold chiseler of rocks for doing fireplaces. I mean, there's some. I shouldn't say no one. That's a finite term. But the notion that people are willing to spend the time to become that skilled at something isn't anywhere near as appealing as becoming a YouTuber or an Instagram model, where all of a sudden a few lucky posts gets you into a high earning position. That to me is kind of a shame, because it becomes like a really desirable thing. It's almost like the same thing that kids growing up in the 70s and the 80s in Canada were constantly being told, hey, if you could join the NHL, man, life is going to be a breeze. Instead, so many people jumping into hockey programs, and hockey dads and hockey moms started showing up and going up to refs and coaches and yelling and screaming at them because somehow they're getting away with their kid's chance of becoming a millionaire hockey player.
Sure.
That's kind of going through like another phase right now of people trying to become internet stars.
I'm glad we finally brought it back to what's important in Canada.
Hockey.
But it never was to us, right? Like we stepped aside from that. I grew up in a hockey town for sure. Like there was a huge push. And most of their dads were union workers. They either working at the mine or they were working at the pulp mill, and they were making great money. Like some of the wealthiest families in all of North America came from my hometown. Not like super rich, but like the average earning of the community was quite high, because you had these unions that were making good wage for these guys, but it wasn't good enough. It's like, no, you got to go to the NHL, you got to sign on, and
That was college.
that was college.
University. Go to the NHL. Try to make it there.
Yeah, there's definitely a huge value in people who kind of like put their head down for 10 years and really become experts in their niche, because then there's no if you become a certain level of expert, then you don't have any competition if you truly know your field better than anyone else. I don't know if that's lost on people these days, or it's just kind of lost on people from a labor perspective, and they don't want to gain those skills in a manual industry or whatever the issue is for that.
I think people use the word labor as a dirty word. You know, like economists talk about it, but when they talk about labor in an economic standpoint, they're always faceless, or they are from some developing economy that migrated to our countries to be able to take the jobs that the people here don't want to do. But, you know, labor is actually something that can be totally embraced by people as being a good thing. So it's actually helping automation have more of a role, because people are being taught at a young age through like almost indoctrination that there's something wrong with doing labor. So the workforce, you talked about earlier, the workforce is just not going to be there anymore. It has nothing to do with robots pushing people out of the workforce. It's somewhere in the lexicon or our pop culture, we've been telling people that labor is something that is for the unfortunate, or the people who didn't make the right decisions, and now they have to suffer through their labor, right?
I'm hearing my career counselor in high school.
Oh, yeah.
You're going to work at a gas station for the rest of your life, Jim. No, I don't feel that way. Anyway.
But it
started early, yeah.
It's true.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a shame, because some of the finest things that we have to appreciate in this world come from really high-skilled labor. Guys who did learn how to hold a cold chisel and carve a rock so that it can be perfectly placed into a fireplace, so that you can have, you know, just exactly the facade that you wanted to build.
It's easy for me to think that that's a great career path for people, and at the same time believe that automation in construction will take over, because automation isn't going to take over those kind of like handmade artisan jobs, because those already are a premium product.
I don't know if this is a true story, but this is something my dad told me when I was quite young. And this was when robotics was starting to find its way into the assembly lines at Ford and Toyota and these places. And that there was the biggest challenge in robotics, 6-axis robotics specifically, was spray painting lacquer onto cars. And what they did is the development of the 6-axis robot was because they had some guy who was the best painter, and all of his motions were like hitting the struts and like getting the finish nice and getting the interior of the car rust treated properly. And there was just this guy who just like had the best motion, but he was aging and they didn't have anyone who was anywhere near as good as him. So they went down and did a motion control study on him. I'm assuming this happened at a Toyota factory, because Fibonacci is a Japanese robotic maker of 6-axis robots. So they far and away were like the #1 6-axis robot. And they basically just analyzed this old guy's movements for months and made sure that they developed a machine that could replicate exactly what he was doing with his arm. And that's where
They came
the
to
6-axis robot was developed.
That's a beautiful example.
Now, I've never fact-checked this. This comes from my old man. He probably told me the story in the 80s, and somebody can hopefully fix that story and tell me where it actually comes from. But it kind of lines up with what we're kind of talking about, how the skill set that is going away doesn't have to go away if we can get the robots to do it for us.
The high school job counselor is one of the biggest conundrums in my mind, because you take a person who has a job that there's no way that was the job they wanted when they were growing up or going to school. I don't think anybody is like, I want to be a job counselor. And then you take somebody who already doesn't have the path they were pursuing, and you have them advise everybody on what to do. It's like,
That's what I never thought of. That's hilarious.
you have the guy. I mean, you want to learn from somebody who's doing something they like that you want to do, or that they wanted to do at least.
Yeah.
So to have somebody who's maybe salty.
There's some good advice for people who are doing what they don't want to do. Like, hey, don't follow in my footsteps.
Like, here's some don'ts. I got some don'ts
I
for
can
you.
tell you right now, this does not end well if you keep on this path.
That was probably actually something I did take from him, was that what I was doing was not necessarily a good path, but his conclusion was all wrong, that's for sure.
But his assessment of the current situation may have been motivating.
Yeah, it may have been. I don't remember it like that, but yeah.
And look how crazy.
Looking back,
Look how crazy the short history of our own lifetimes has been. Can you imagine being in a role where you're supposed to advise people on what decisions to make for the future that we have no idea is going to be?
How many of them said you're never going to carry a calculator in your pocket? They all said that.
Yeah. Yeah, but I happen to prefer hanging around with people who are okay with mental mathematics than people who will just sit there stunned until somebody pulls their calculator out.
I love mental mathematics, but multiplying a penny 37 times, I'll pull the calculator out for.
Yeah.
What do you think so with all the automation and efficiencies that we've realized recently, like you said, this has been like one of the most transformative times in history. So what will be lost to that?
That's a good question.
It's towards the end, we're 2 hours in, so very few people will hear your answer. Not a lot of pressure.
Attachment. I think people will be way less attached to their work in the future. I already know I am. When we were doing things by hand, woodworking, and then when we were doing things with the CNC woodworking, my attachment to that piece diminished. Whatever. I mean, we shouldn't really have a whole lot of intrinsic love for inanimate objects anyways, but, you know, in being in love with your craft isn't a detrimental characteristic. I think that's a good thing.
I would say maybe the leisure time is what's going to disappear, where there's an expectation to produce because it's easier or available. You know, we're maybe going to be looking down upon leisure time for or production for the purpose of enjoyment. Yeah.
Because there's something productive.
It's kind of along the same sort of lines, yeah.
Although I'm going to play complete devil's advocate on that one. I actually have this sort of utopian view that at some point everything already exists that's necessary because robots are making it for us, and all we can do is hang out on the beach and surf and go snowboarding.
Okay.
The whole planet.
Yeah.
Nobody on the planet actually.
I mean, I'm thinking more in terms of during that transition when the robots are doing or learning to do all these things for us, and we've got no excuses to produce.
It's going to suck for the artists because every single person on the planet will realize they're also an artist.
We talked about ideal companies or clients or whatever, but one thing we didn't mention was artisans, and they are a huge, important component to what we're doing as well, right?
Well, because it brings up the notion that what I'm saying, I think everybody is actually an artist. And I'm going to give you an exact example of that. So when I started my first skateboard business, I was in high school, and I was an absolutely horrible graphics designer with a pen and paper. And so I would have to raise a few bucks to pay my buddies who were good at doing art so that I could put their graphics on the shirts or on skateboards or whatever. And then along came this little software from Ottawa called CorelDRAW. It allowed me to use a mouse to draw my graphics, and all of a sudden I didn't need the artists anymore because I still had this vision in my mind of what I wanted to see represented on my products, but I didn't have the actual dexterity to make it happen. But when you can go in and you can use digital manufacturing to make what your vision is, you are actually opening up the door for people who didn't think they were artists to become artists. So I have probably over 1,000 different images that I've created for t-shirts and skateboards over the last 30 years that wouldn't have existed had I not had access to some sort of computer-aided design.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm totally resonate with that too, because for the same reason, I could never draw very well. I could get an idea across, but even then, I wasn't a very good drawer. I still am not a very good drawer. But when I discovered computer drawings and the ability to make them straight and square and precise, I felt an outlet that I could communicate with other people all of a sudden. The exact same way.
It's incredible how natural you're making that symbiotic relationship between you and the technology feel when it's so unnatural for that technology to be at your disposal.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, yes
Yeah,
or
I think
no.
trying to define what natural is though at this point,
Yeah.
right? I mean, humans are still like walking around carbon molecules like all the other life on this planet, so
Yeah.
everything we do is not that amazing.
Drawing started with like animal blood on the walls of caves, right?
We've got some right over there.
Really?
On that cliff face over there. It's probably only a few hundred years old, but
Is that on the hike?
you need to go on a boat to see it.
Yeah.
It's on the underhangs.
Are those
of the
real?
cliffs.
I thought that was some kids that did that.
It could be, but the petroglyphs around here are apparently authentic. Yeah, there's several of them around the lake.
That thing turned
I don't think it's
off
blood
again?
though. I think it's.
Sorry about that, man. Keeps failing.
I don't think it's blood though. I think it's juice from huckleberries or something. Cedar juice.
I don't know if this is something you don't like talking about, but you're one of the least vocal vegans I've ever met.
Well, I'm not truly vegan actually, so.
Okay.
I actually eat seafood products, so.
Vegetarian?
I'm still an
or-
animal murderer of another form. I don't eat any farm-based animal thing.
I don't know why I thought that was the difference between vegetarian and vegan. Is like a vegan
Vegan is not animal products at all. They
Okay.
don't eat honey. So
pescatarian,
I would be considered pescatarian, yeah.
but you're not very vocal about it. Like you're not. Oh, I think vegans and people who have dietary constraints have a reputation for being in your face about it. Or have you not ever heard
I'm
that?
too old for that shit, man. I don't have anything to accomplish that with anymore. I
Yeah.
mean, if you're curious, then I'll gladly share, dietary views. But people don't need to have. The problem with righteousness is it actually makes it so that your message is intentionally ignored. You gotta be careful with that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, that kind of comes back to your skater mentality and seeing the perspective of maybe a little senseless rebellion for the sake of rebellion and understanding how to mitigate that.
No, but yet you have to live by your own moral code. You don't have to share your moral code with other people. That's just your own. It's your own government.
True, but you're still trying to make some big changes for the greater good, certainly from a technology and shelter perspective.
But that could actually be a very selfish pursuit. It can be totally about self that you want to only do the right thing. And you don't even need to be doing it to measure yourself up against other people. It's because you yourself want to like who you are.
Have you ever heard of Ayn Rand?
Of course, when you were talking about it earlier about design over function, I thought you were going to bring up the Fountainhead because Tim is pretty far from an Ayn Rand follower by any stretch of the imagination, but there is, I think, a fine balance between function over.
I was thinking The Virtue of Selfishness is a short book that she wrote.
I don't think I've read that one, but there's definitely a lot of the same mindset you're talking about in the Howard Rourke character in Fountainhead, where individuality doesn't necessarily need to be a public engagement, but then also public engagement doesn't necessarily need to be to the benefit of all individuals. So there's some strong thinking process that went into that. I don't necessarily like how a lot of her thinking has been adopted by this sort of screw everybody who can't hold their own type attitude, because there's a little bit that goes on around that. And I don't necessarily think that that's what she was trying to set out there, but
Yeah, The Virtue of Selfishness is pretty much that book she wrote, or like pamphlet, or I don't know, it's philosophical, it's not like a fictional story, but it just describes how sometimes people will do things for the good of others, but that's still a selfish endeavor because it makes them feel good to do good. So it's like when they donate to charity, sure, they're giving, but they're also getting a sense of warmth, a sense of contribution, a sense of maybe longevity.
well, at our base code, if you're to look at DNA as being the same thing as code, there's nothing about community in that. It's all about survivalism. And a lot of people think that the theory about evolution is about what's good for the species, and it's not. It was always about what's good for the individual. What happened is the species had the byproduct by becoming better. So.
Yeah, I am resonating strongly with what you're saying right now, because I think often about how there's a Venn diagram of the things that are good for you and the things that are good for society. And there's a meeting between those two that's like a very beautiful place. Like, I think automation in construction is one of those places where the people who are contributing to it are building equity in companies that are transforming an industry that can provide ultimately higher value to hopefully everyone. And so through the selfish motivation of having either just an impact on the world or building a big company or sharing information, there's like a greater good. But then there's obviously the flip side of that, which is like the Venn diagram portion where it benefits people and doesn't benefit the greater good. And that's why you get like oil spills and like all this different environmental issues and people who are not thinking about that. And so when you can isolate that segment where it's mutually beneficial, that's where I guess beautiful things happen.
Yep, I think I agree.
Yeah.
But in the same breath,
Nothing's recording here right now.
that's recording.
You did such a beautiful speech.
Yeah. Well, I got to hear it.
In the same breath,
yeah.
Ayn Rand is like considered the cornerstone of capitalism.
Well, no, I think there's a large number of modern capitalists who've adopted Ayn Rand's writings as being some sort of textbook as to how they're supposed to analyze certain things. But she by no means was the first person to have had those thoughts and to realize that there's strength in the individual. I mean, you know.
I suppose the
There's
alternative.
people who would say that Napoleon did phenomenal things for his people. I don't actually think he gave a shit about those people, but you know,
What he was doing.
his individualistic pursuits had a side effect of benefiting those who were around him.
For me personally, I think about that Venn diagram for the sake of, I guess, my sleep at night. If I can contribute my energies towards something that's not only good for me but good for society, then maybe I'll sleep better and live longer and be healthier, and those things will give me a leg up so that I can, I guess, be better than the rest of society in competition or whatever circumstances. But yeah, like you're saying, it's all, I think everything is selfishly motivated, even the desire to be selfish.
Well, being part of a social structure doesn't make you not individualistic, and there are an enormous number of species on the planet who their very existence is because they developed social structures that allow them to work together, but they only exist to pass on their gene pool because they individually survived whatever it is that they as a species has gone through. So it's always about the self.
On some level, the internet is making us more like ants in that perspective. In like, people always theorize that ants have some subtle communication method that goes beyond like words or movements or sight, because they are so limited. They have to be near the queen. They are so orchestrated. And now that we have the internet and like a common communication factor, we're as a society becoming less individually focused and more.
Yeah, except there's no queen ant in the internet right now, unfortunately, and so you have a whole lot of
Google
ants who think that they're army ants, but they're actually worker ants, or you have a whole lot of ants who think they're doctor ants instead of being patient ants. And I think that the notion that somehow or other everybody becoming mini experts in a bunch of things that they know really little about is actually kind of holding things back a bit, sadly. So, yeah.
There's some queen ants that think they're worker ants too, and maybe some worker ants that think they're queen ants.
I suppose. It's getting very metaphorical at this
Yeah, I'm
point.
a little more technical rather than philosophical myself. But
That's why I brought them here, so that we could kind of divulge past
Relax
some
a
of the
little.
technical stuff. And
well, I'm not upset about that. I do like that flavor there. It's a good flavor.
so, what's like if you were to give a foresight projection of kind of like you mentioned a utopia, what does the house that 3D printing build looks like, and not just the single house, like the whole concept brought together in the future?
well, it serves people in community, whether they want it or not, or isolation, or it's got to serve in the same range of diversity that people are. I think.
Infinite.
People have the highest quality of life possible for the least amount of impacts on the environment and the surroundings and the pain of the others around them.
I'd say it's quite constrained right now, right? You need to have a certain lifestyle to afford a certain structure or residence or whatever. There's a lot of constraint in your lifestyle in order to have a home or objects. Hopefully that's going to change, right? Like that'll be something that's serving rather than gets served.
It has to be an enabling technology, not an exclusionary technology. It has to do something that makes it so that the people who are hoping to have better conditions for their living arrangements or whatever it is they're looking to have better arrangements in, that this technology contributes to that. Less people are under anxiety and more people are contributing in a constructive way than in a reactionary or a desperate way. So, that is very philosophical, but housing is kind of at the core of all of our security. Every single human being needs shelter, and there's sadly like close to 1 billion people on this planet right now who are pretty close to not having any shelter at all if they don't already find themselves in a situation where they have no shelter. And robotic construction, I think, can lift everybody out of that state.
I have no doubt that it can lift everybody out of the state. I'm maybe a little bit more pessimistic about what government and worldly authorities, powers that be, will allow us to have. So the construction technology, the printers and stuff, will make advances and make things easier. But then we're also going to see, I think, restrictions, regulations, taxation. We're going to make some advances
Peons
here.
haven't figured out greed yet, and they haven't got to control their greed yet, and so they want to get in there and insert their desires above the needs of others. That's for sure going to go on no matter what.
Yeah, no matter what. So it's kind of a battle between good and evil. Construction technology, printers and stuff is going to enable people, and the other people are going to try to take whatever gains they get away from them. So
most of the issues you just brought up to me sound regulatory, and it's like the system that exists now, from the unions that have been built up and the existing construction like megalith of an industry. They're so powerful, and so they have there's permitting, there's different municipal standards, and it seems like that regulatory giant is a foe that's going to have to be overcome.
Well, I mean, you satisfy them, and then they put new implications or new restrictions on, right? So
it's our responsibility to turn them into participants. Yeah. Like he's saying, maybe they start out as a foe, but their foe. The reason why they'd be a foe is based on ignorance.
It seems like a lot of the narrative is around fitting into existing standards, and the sad part is that if you have to fit into a standard and there's some efficiency you're probably leaving on the table.
That's a good fair point, I'd say. Yep.
If there's a number on it, I'd say it's like in the middle somewhere, like half or something, because but again, it's an ignorance thing. And that's why we count on TU Eindhoven, we count on Saxion, we count on University of Sherbrooke, Selkirk College here. These schools will teach their kids to challenge the status quo at the regulatory level through science, and eventually the studies will exist that will make it impossible for the governing bodies or the regulatory bodies to not acknowledge these advancements that have been made. Because as much as everybody likes to make place for the faith or the belief in things, at the end of the day, it's always the science and the math that allows for regulatory bodies to allow things to keep moving forward. And so that's why the schools that have digital manufacturing programs are actually going to be the ones that lead the charge for companies like ours to succeed.
Yeah, that's fair. Just a little disheartening, because I imagine some of those regulatory organizations are going to want to see I guess, time-proven studies. So that could take decades before they're really comfortable with some of the structural calculations potentially.
Time's relative, though. Like,
Yeah.
some of those time studies will be months, some will be years. You know, we wrote a quote for a house that we were going to build for a family here this year, and we had to write into that quote what we thought was a fair 20-year warranty on our work. It's pretty hard to write a 20-year warranty out for something that's only existed for 3 years. But, you know, we committed to it because we have to have the confidence that if a problem arises that we haven't thought of yet, we have the adequate brain power in our organization to overcome that and make that client satisfied with whatever it is that they've expected from us on knowledge that wasn't even achieved anywhere yet. So,
I mean, how much can you simulate time? Can you take a printed concrete block and freeze it, thaw it, freeze it, thaw it, freeze it, thaw it 100 times, and that gives you the equivalent of a certain...
that answers a very specific question, but
It's not the same question.
freeze thaw for 2 years, and
Weather
then have a 16-year-old kid practice learning how to pitch curveballs against it for a year, and then
Pollution in the
somebody
rain.
backing their RV into it like 2 years after that, and like, you know, there's a lot of things that go on in a building structure that you can't necessarily create simulations for.
So let's say any of the examples you just brought up causes some kind of cosmetic damage in the printed concrete. How do you fix it?
Cosmetics, honestly, cosmetics is a
need to?
conversation.
Let's say it's a hole.
Cosmetic is about opinion.
Let's say it's a
Cosmetic is-
Superman throw, and there's a baseball-sized hole now straight through
Yeah.
the wall.
Well, in our case, we would try to
Do
make
we need
it
to fix
look as it looked before. Did it fail because of something that should or shouldn't have been happening? But at the end of the day, from a construction standpoint, our responsibility is structural integrity, so that whatever condition that thing is in, whether it is in some form of decay or abuse, that nobody is at risk for that state that it's found itself in. So the types of warranties or guarantees that you could offer in something like this would be that, you know, these sort of known activities that should have existed around the normal use case of a house has not put anybody in that house at risk because
So-
of the construction strategy we chose for 3D printing or hybrid 3D printing and something else.
Relatively, how much easier would it be to fix, or how much more difficult is it to fix a hole in a concrete wall than like a fist-sized hole in drywall or something? That would be like a $10 quick repair. Much more difficult.
Depends if you want to be able to punch the hole there again. Do you want to be able to actually back to the original structure?
I mean, you could plaster it,
because the drywall
or
hole
you could use concrete.
isn't as good as it was before.
Mm-hmm.
So it's what stage you want to return it to. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
That's okay. That's good. Well, yeah, what do you want to do? Do you want to make it look as original? Do you want to patch it to stop the airflow? Do you want to?
I think patching it to stop the airflow is like the minimum standard.
That's pretty easy.
Anything above that is more, you need a sculptor.
You know what the hardest part would be, in all honesty? Trying to make it look like the really cool bead lines that were there when we printed it the first time.
Very difficult to replicate.
But if people want to go and cover up all these really nice, cool prints with plaster, then it's super easy. But
I think they will want to cover up the cool prints with plaster just for normalcy's sake. I think people will just want flat, plain walls.
Yeah, I think, and it's really cool to look at right now and interesting, but it's going to look like rec room siding, rec room wall.
Yeah, hopefully maybe the exterior at least can stay raw.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, it's also a dust trap too,
there,
right?
there will be
bugs
different
and
schools
dark-
of thought.
Yeah, there's
There'll be different
tons,
schools
yeah.
of thought. So the plastering that we see now, it's very common in, say, like Greek structure or whatever. It wasn't done because they were trying to make it look nicer. It was a treatment, right? So sometimes what's functional becomes the thing that people want. Like, you look across that street, you've got like a red brick over there. I think it's pretty easy to say that that's not the most attractive color that people want in things, but we're totally comfortable in accepting red bricks all over the place because that was the material of choice that made it so that a brick could exist. And now when people see a brick that's white or gray or something else, they're like, oh, that's ugly. I don't want that
It doesn't
fake
fit,
looking
yeah.
brick.
Yeah, I
in my
personally
house.
really like red brick.
But you don't know why it's red. Like, why it's the red you like. I mean, you can know why the brick itself is red, but you can't really put your finger on why it is. That thing that you feel comfortable with is what you like the most. I think 3D printed walls, maybe not in our lifetime, may be this thing where people are like, oh man, can you believe all these people covered their 3D printed walls with plaster? Just like I'm sure underneath carpets all over the world, there's this
Hardwood
beautiful
floors.
hardwood floor, and people are
Ripping
like
up their
mind-boggling.
carpets.
How
It's a
can you guys
travesty.
do this to this? Because to them, hardwood was cheap, and 3D printing might seem cheap to people for a while, but at some point, they're going to see like, hey, this is a genuine 3D printed house. This is not like one of those fake, and people will make fake 3D printed look things on things, and just like fake carbon fiber. How much of that stuff we had to endure over the last 10
Very
years?
true.
Silk screened or inkjet printed carbon fiber parts.
It's a cool analogy to make between hardwood floors that have been covered up and 3D printed walls that are being covered up. It would be very cool to see that ultimately come to fruition. We'll see how long it takes. Everything always comes in and out of
You got to come back here when you're 124 and peel off the plaster in the Fibonacci House. I'm like, look, this is like the original print underneath here.
I never thought people would want to see the rec room siding again.
What is this rec room siding?
It's like a veneered wood product with vertical lines in it. It almost looks like board and bat style.
You don't remember that?
You don't remember that
You're
stuff?
probably too
It's
young.
probably 3/16 or 1/4, like a 6 mil thick plywood with a cedar finish on it with dark lines.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely remember.
Masonite. It was made out of masonite, and then it had like a faux wood cover to it. Super flexible. You could hit it with
It was
a
plywood.
soccer
I
ball.
don't think it was masonite. I think it was plywood.
There was a big knotty pine movement going on for a long time, but is that different? It's not like
No,
knotty
that
pine.
was retro. The knotty pine thing was retro. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time picturing this rec room. But
You had to grow up in
Maybe
the 70s.
Flat. Yeah, maybe I'll send you a link after to some
Yeah.
pictures and you can show
Yeah.
the viewers what it looks like.
A lot of houses in the 1980s had it, but by the 90s, everyone was tearing it out.
Covered up.
yeah, printed concrete certainly dynamic in its adaptability. Like it's because of its form, it holds whatever you stick on it well, right?
It can. Sure can.
But it doesn't always.
It's got a lot of mechanical
Interface.
surface,
Yeah.
interface, corrugation.
Well, I don't know what you mean by the word whatever. I think putting ceramic tiles on 3D print is going to be kind of annoying. You're going to use a lot of adhesive to fill unnecessary cracks. But putting plaster obviously going to very easily go on, like Jim says, there's a lot of interlock elements there. It's definitely not going to hold wallpaper too easily. It's going to be something to get. It's going to
It'd
get.
be fun to see sprayed on
After you
wallpaper.
plaster it, though, you could easily wallpaper it.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. But that's that.
Do people still do wallpaper?
I don't think so.
No, I don't think so.
Well, it'll come back. For sure. It'll come back. People have wallpaper that's like, unique piece for the whole thing. Anyway.
Well, at this point, how many employees does Twente have total?
I honestly don't know what that number is exactly. I think it's between 15 and 20, I think, worldwide.
If you were to put out a guess of where you might be 2 years from now.
We think we're going to hit about 300 employees.
300 in 2 years.
Yeah.
So I guess a big challenge that you're facing, you mentioned this earlier, is, Jim, you're the primary print operator generally in the
At this
facility.
location.
So how do you get 100 people that have your level of expertise with the printer?
I don't think we need that
We
many,
don't need
but
100.
we need some.
Yeah, what's the best way to replicate the expertise you've developed?
I don't think it'll ever be exactly replicated. We're going to have people with other strong and weak points.
Jim
we're
runs
gonna-
machinery from the perspective of a developer. It's very different from somebody who's running a machine from the perspective of an operator. So I actually think that I think I estimated in my last business model that we would need something like between 60 and 75 machine operators about 3 years from now.
In order to service what kind of locality?
That would be global rollouts, but it would be at that point somewhere between 40 and 50% of our sales would be printing services only. So we'll have a large component, of course, it's always machinery sales, but as this is early adoption, we know that the very large construction companies who are not ready to jump in will definitely need to outsource some printing services because it's going to become obvious to them that there's certain things that they should be doing 3D printing now because the market is proving very quickly that doing things through conventional methods is not competitive with 3D printing anymore, so they will require companies like ours or 3D Vinci in Dubai or other companies who are set up to offer printing as a service to meet some of their targets for structural and cosmetic 3D printing elements.
I see landscape architecture.
Yeah, landscape's another huge one. But the actual development of the company, like, you know, our company founding team is 6 guys. Actually, we're pretty excited to announce that we have a new CTO in the organization. It's a longtime business partner of mine named Mark Robitaille, who has been kind of under contract to work for the wind energy company that he and I used to be owners of before we sold it. And as of December this year, he's going to be back working with us again.
We're really excited to have Mark.
So we're really excited about that.
So when you said you were fired, you weren't really fired. You were bought out of your last.
I mean, it's a close thing, so I don't really get into it. There's actually some really wonderful people in that organization, but I was supposed to stay on as long as Mark was, and the owner, the CEO of that company is really one of the smartest people I've ever met. His name is Rudolf Hadorn from Gert. Gert is a company that bought Mark's my other company, and I think he recognized that my personality type is not going to sit so well in this sort of hierarchy corporate structure, and that some of my fast opinions were maybe not as refined before going out to the rest of the organization.
It's pretty typical after an acquisition to replace the leadership so that you can kind of reestablish the new leadership.
I guess so, but it was more along the lines of, I guess I didn't hold back my criticisms of things that I thought were affecting the well-being of my former employees, and they felt that it's not really my place to be concerning myself with things that I'm not actually directly responsible for.
After they bought you out.
They actually gave me some parameters of what my job role was, and I kept like looking over the fence into these other areas because I had like a lot of love for the people who I built that company up with, and I didn't want to see the promises that I had made to them about what kind of work life they were going to have get taken away from them because the new management had a different direction than they wanted the company to go in. So
to me, that sounds less like a firing and more like a conscious choice you made about how you want to operate, potentially against the what they were imagining.
So we use the term firing kind of loosely because it's a little bit comical, but it was basically an agreement to go separate ways.
That can be the title: How Ian Got Fired.
I didn't want to leave when they asked me to leave, so from that standpoint, it did feel like a firing because I wanted to keep protecting the people.
But you did know that you were making decisions a little contrary to what the new ownership was after.
I thought that I could prove to them that their doubts were wrong. So I wasn't actually trying to go against them per se. I was trying to show them that there's this actually better result than they suspected was achievable.
Yeah.
And that made me step outside of my bounds.
Rebellion with the intention for being helpful.
Well, obviously,
that's always the intention.
If you're in a company, you're trying to create profit. Like for all of the elements around like what our moral code is and what our objectives are and our mission statement are, is your company still has to generate profit that can be shared by those who have made the investment or who've loaned to that organization in order for that organization to exist. So everything I did in work prior to that company being purchased and other companies has always had profit at the sort of core as to why those decisions are getting made. It's not always obvious to people who don't look at the whole picture and they're only just sort of seeing like their individual perspective, the roles they're on. But yeah, companies have to make money.
Yeah, I mean that's probably the reason why you guys are still around today. Without profitability, you can't continue any operation.
It was great to get Ian early.
This is dead.
I was quite happy to get Ian's undivided attention earlier than anticipated. Unfortunately, we've had to wait this long for Mark's.
Yeah,
Really.
but it's going to be awesome when he shows up. He's the most brilliant technical mind I've ever met. like without a doubt. Like I've met some really smart people over the years. This guy can see inside mechanisms. He can see inside the way things function in ways that it's just.
He's got insight.
Yeah.
Intuition.
And insight. You know, it's all backed with the experience and
studies and But there's something special about him. You know, like he has this technique of sitting and listening and watching, and even if he knows so much better than everyone else who's talking in the room, he just lets them run their course. And then he sticks his finger up and he goes, okay, you guys.
Here's the point we need to make.
It's pretty awesome. It can be super disheartening at times because
beyond just the actual brilliance behind it, that presentation method of being super quiet and then waiting to speak up and having like an omniscient point is very powerful for him. Is he kind of the traditional introverted engineering mind, would you say?
Introvert, I wouldn't say is his thing. No, he's actually quite outspoken, and he wants to be heard when it's time
calculated,
to be heard.
reserved.
Yeah, he thinks. Okay, we're talking about Mark as a personality here. We should be careful. But I think he's always a little bit suspicious that people are outside of their element, which has been probably horrible for him for having me as a partner for 20 years, because I'm always right at the edge of my comfort level. Whereas he likes to function in that very comfort level, you know, where he knows entirely what's going on around him.
And even then waits to get all the information.
Yeah, even waits. But really what it boils down to is like the machines he designs and conceptualizes and develops end up working better than almost everything that is out there doing the same thing. And he does it for less money, and he does it for lower weight, and he does it for longer, like robustness before it falls apart, and that's just like in custom automation, and 3D printing is basically going to be off the shelf automation at some point. He's like the full package.
So when his first day off his old job, the company you guys sold, his first day with Twente, what's your task for him?
Pump, I think, is the first thing. Everybody in the 3D printing world right now is functioning on modifications of pumps that existed for other applications, and Twente will have the greatest 3D printing pump that ever existed.
So will that be something you sell to other companies?
Yep. Totally. Vertical can have a pump, and Cobot can have a pump, and all of our supposed competition will be buying their pumps from us because it'll just make their products much easier to sell to their clients.
I was going to mention earlier when you were talking about the nozzle, it seems like the nozzle is like just kind of an extension of the pump, and the real magic is all happening in the pump. And you had the intern develop a sensor.
It's everybody's working together.
Yeah.
One failure and you can hear it. You can see it.
Yep.
There's a definite
a lot of variables.
The complexity behind the 6-axis robotic arm has kind of been well discovered. And like there's existing solutions, you just have to plug in.
Fine-tuning motion control. And
the pump, that's more of new grounds, or?
Well, I mean, there's existing technology that's being repurposed, so it's quite convenient to go ahead and use it when you're developing a nozzle, when you're learning your motion control, your grasshopper programs and all that other kind of stuff. So, you kind of get to a point where you start noticing the idiosyncrasies of each pump or unit or whatever.
And what you need
So,
to
it's, I've probably mentioned it 5 or 10 times already. I'm watching water content, right? So that's one of the big factors in printing. It affects everything, so it's a very prominent factor to keep our eyes on and control.
Yeah, one of the few points of waste in the process seems to be perfecting the water content of the material before you start the print.
Yes. Oh, we'll dump. We won't dump. We'll utilize it wherever we can. Infilling formwork, or making molds, shoring up our yard, whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, relatively it's a small amount. It's like a couple 5-gallon buckets at most.
Yep. But you know, it happens every print. So if we do 1 print or 5 prints in a session, we're still wasting the same amount of stuff.
What is that shape supposed to be? It looks slightly phallic.
Yep, it's a reservoir tip.
I don't know what you're talking about. It's a wall connector.
It's a reservoir tip. Protection.
No, we're experimenting with some different ways to interface precast components. The idea was that this would get cut here, and then this tip would get inserted in there.
Mm-hmm.
If it was adequately lubed.
Yep.
But
For that actual, this is actually a 4-way piece. You need 4 of these to complete the circle.
So it's a potential.
That's almost outhouse length, though.
Yep.
A little bit small for outhouse. Pretty cool.
Yep.
It's a wall structure. A company in Dubai wants us to do a bunch of prefab buildings for them for very fast deployment. So we want them to basically stand up together on their own. So if somebody else has to come later to mortar them together or whatever, then they can take a bit of wind and sun and still hang out in their place.
Yeah, the design implications are like unimaginably massive, and the it's stuff like that that's going to be symbiotically structured together, I guess, modularly. That's going to demonstrate to people the applications that 3D printing can have, and it also lets you test things, and it lets you make a quick concept of something without it being a huge expense to develop the technology to make that form.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of different design strategies and techniques that have not been considered for probably hundreds of years, even, you know, like before modern, I don't know, what is it, industrial revolution, where you can do things over and over again, kind of constrain what you can do. Now we're going back to a time when things can be unique again.
It needs a reconsideration from first principles of the, I guess, you really need the most talented and creative architects to have a firm grasp of the capabilities of printed concrete so that they can make designs that can maximize the nuance.
Talented or well-educated. Those are interchangeable.
Yeah, so different, though.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in awe of the talented, of course, but they've kind of had it easy, haven't they? Don't you think? The well-educated are the ones who've actually, you know, put in the hard time.
The talented are just cruising
They just
along.
show up, and everybody likes what they do.
Interesting way to put it.
Is the
true.
talented,
It's true. Yeah.
so does Jim fall under the talented or the well-educated?
I think Jim falls under the bright category. It's different.
That's another category.
That's not a category. Because if you're bright, you know when you're not talented. Because there's a lot of people who are not talented who think they are. And the well-educated can sometimes not have a really good grasp on real world
Practicality.
Yeah, practicality. So, I should say well-educated from the standpoint of like life experience education as well as conventional.
Yeah, there's like a third factor in there that was misleading me, is like maybe street smarts versus talent versus.
Well, I mean, which is like, you know, neither Jim or I have any post-secondary education, so everything we learned is from hanging around with people like Tim and Mark and Jonathan and guys who have had the generosity to take time to bring us up to understandings that they took the time to go and study.
Yeah, it's a compliment that they'll help us.
No, we wouldn't be anywhere where we are right now if there wasn't for the help of people who want us to understand something that we don't understand.
Yeah, I've got the feeling I want to pay it forward too. You know, we have some people on staff that are younger and that are learning, and I'm realizing, hey, I know how to do this, I know how to do that, and they're asking how to, you know, and I'm happy to.
Mentorship's huge.
Yeah.
Huge. I think actually we talk about moral obligations. I think everybody should be doing some form of mentorship of some form or another. And I've got like a lot of guys, like Ali, who's one of the guys who met out there, who's out there doing some 3D printing work, he's doing some construction work. I've known him since he had just turned 15 years old. He'd been hanging around trying to figure out how to make skateboards with the CNC machine, and you know, and it's really awesome to watch where he went from just sort of like curiosity to now he's developing his own ideas about how things can be done. And through mentorship that he was able to find a path of creating his own education, basically.
It's cool how you guys take some of your employees that were hired for various roles and train them into kind of more complex positions. Like some employees were hired mostly for like a labor position or different tasks, and yet at this point they're working on kind of high-level robotics and working on robotic arms, working on.
Yeah.
I saw Jared doing some welding the other day, so there's like a
he
huge
wasn't
variety
of that, but
No,
exactly.
yeah, it's kind of cool, actually.
Yeah, it is.
People should be, one, allowed to work in the field they feel most confident in. Of course, that's not always applicable. And I think that what we've got going is an environment where people are allowed to sort of play in domains that might be outside of their comfort level, because they're really killing it on the crappy stuff. They do grunt in front of that bag of latacrete material with the shovel and pounding the auger full of material that can go through the
Cleaning up the pump.
Yeah, it's like there's a lot of lousy jobs out there. So by giving them non-lousy jobs to go along with that stuff, they're excited to see the company move forward and succeed as well.
Yeah, I mean, you make it kind of seem like it's super intentional. It seems almost more serendipitous in that, like, you have these guys they're taking a job, they may not expect it to be super technical, and then there's just a task where, okay, there's this technical problem, Ian's got to do this task, Jim is busy with this task, this guy happens to be right here, so now he has exposure to this realm.
But let's be fair. Like, everybody who shows up for a job with us is told immediately this is a highly technological workspace. There's going to be a bunch of things going on around that are essential that may not be presented as such, like communication wires that are laid across sharp steel grates, and there's a bunch of chaos going on around there, and you have to be conscientious that even if you're just here to do labor, there's some really tight variable work that's going on around you that can't really be mucked with. So please learn what these things are and how they are affecting the quality of what we're trying to do, the overall picture, and get engaged. And if you see that even Jim, who's absolutely knows that it's wrong for a particular wire to be run in a certain direction because it's going to get cut or rolled over by somebody with a forklift or something that could cause the printer to stop working, that they're supposed to step in and say, hey, that doesn't look right, Jim. And Jim will be like, oh, of course, can you jump on that for me? So it's kind of like a call to be engaged.
Yeah.
Just don't come here expecting that you can just do this one thing and put your earphones on and think about chicks while you're working all day, and actually see what's going on around you, and if there's something that you can contribute or participate in, that you're not going to get in trouble for asking dumb questions, whether or not what they see should stay the way it is or not.
That earphones one is I don't know if it's a generational thing, but it's definitely something that's dividing in the workforce. I've certainly had jobs where I've had earphones in and been sometimes reprimanded for it. Most of the time it's kind of just let go, but maybe I've sensed resentment for having earphones in.
Well, we had Walkmans
nuts, actually.
we had Walkmans when we were kids growing up too. It's not actually a generational thing, it's an age thing. And what it has to do with is when you have your earphones in, you're actually denying yourself a chance to participate in something bigger than what it is you're doing immediately around you.
Yeah. The root of the frustration
is a good way to put it.
When I have my headphones in and somebody wants me to do something and they say, hey, Jared, and I can't hear them. That's a big problem in the workforce. If you're the whole benefit of being face-to-face in person in an office is the value of being able to say, hey, to someone's face and have that conversation.
Respond, pay attention, be engaged.
Well, that's part of it, but there's the other side. It's Ellie can be over there working on a Tillicum, and all he's got to do is tighten bolts. And man, he's got 150 bolts he's got to tighten today. It's a pretty monotonous thing. But if he's sitting there and he's listening to music, and Jim and I are in the same room, and he and I are talking about the finer details of motion control or something, he's not actually absorbing any of that conversation because he's listening to some.
But to play devil's advocate, you do have a noisy facility, and a lot of those noises are equipment noises that are the same droning noise, and I've noticed a lot of people have the AirPods that which cancel out the noise. So maybe there's a added value to being able to. But that
noise is information. And Jim and I, who at one point were in our skateboard company, were 2 employees, and our CNC could be running 50 feet away from us, and we'd be working away doing CAD or doing marketing or something in the office. And all of a sudden, we'd hear the machine go from and we're like, oh shit! And we'd jump up and we'd run over because we could hear that was a symptom of something that wasn't supposed to be going on.
Can we innovate our way out of this problem so that you get the benefits of the noise cancellation and also you mitigate the issue? Like maybe you can have a buzzer.
Yes, there we go, an interrupt. So whenever I want to talk to them, I can interrupt their music.
Give them some kind of annoying sound.
But that's
hey,
intentional.
Jared, instead of yelling, hey Jared, I can yell.
But that's intentional communication only. It still allows for them to not be completely engaged with the surroundings.
They're not engaged with the surroundings.
But isn't some of your best work completed in a flow state when you're only focused on the single task at hand instead of the world around you?
Yeah. Sometimes you don't want the interruption, right?
Yeah.
You want to stay focused on what you're doing to get it done. But around our shop, there's a lot of things happening
all the time.
Whatever, we let them decide when that time is, honestly. They don't have to keep their earpods out, and we don't tell them that they should put them in. Like it's a, they're
or take them out. You don't force them.
They're governing themselves right now.
Yeah, they're governing themselves. Yeah. I mean, we did talk about maybe only having one ear in, and there's like a bunch of people in the room, and there's some.
That sounds a little like a grandpa policy.
A grandpa policy?
Well, because you want to be facilitating, but you don't necessarily want to. Make it so that you're...
What does that do if you cancel all the noise coming from one ear and then you hear it from the other? I don't know. I think the noise canceling is part of the value.
We're not going to get in trouble for causing problems. It's psychological problems.
Yeah, I don't know. I have to say, focus is a funny thing. It's one of these things that will be discussed for generations and generations. And, there's actually a lot of literature out there that says that people should be great multitaskers. But there's also even more evidence that shows that multitasking is actually really horrible behavior, and that only people who have sort of like the chemical imbalance of like what's considered to be attention deficiency hyperactivity disorder, those are the only people who should really be allowed to work in multitasking roles because they've developed the skill sets over the years, or just whatever their chemistry allows them.
Are you considering the headphones to be multitasking?
No, what I'm saying is that people who need to focus sometimes need to have their environment prepared for them so that they're allowed to focus. But there's a lot of push, like the highly successful notions that you can do this, and you can be doing emails, or you're talking on the phone, and doing all of these multiple processes at the same time, and they're learning that basically means that none of those things were done very well at all.
Yeah.
And that if you just stopped and did this one, and then moved on to that one, and then moved on to that one, most people actually get much better results if they just did one thing at a time. But it's not trendy. It's not revered to be a single tasker. Multitasking is like this kind of put on a pedestal sort of mindset. So, and again, then there's other people who they only function in some sort of introverted manner. So people who are like on the scale of they use the term spectrum for Asperger's or autism, and they can have some phenomenal breakthroughs on things. But like if the temperature of the room is off, or if there's like some sort of grating noise in the corner or whatever, they don't get to be able to go down that far of their thinking process in order to be able to have those insights. And so, as an employer and as a company with multiple people, we try really hard to let people know who they are and create the work environment around themselves so that they feel like they can do the most that they can accomplish on any given task. So whatever, you can push and shove a little bit here and there, say, please, if it's print day and there's 6 of us and we're running around, can you take one of your earpods out? But if we don't need them to be doing something and they want to shove them both in, then yeah, that's totally fine. But is this a human resources or is this a philosophical conversation? Hard to say.
Yeah, at a certain level, entrepreneurship at the right scale always comes down to human resources, because it takes teamwork to achieve certain size goals.
Yeah.
And any teamwork, the biggest problem will sometimes be people.
I had this really awesome professional assistant that I hired for for a summer, and she ended up being like one of the smartest people I've ever met. And she's gone on to like be a manager of another company, and she could not stand the term human resources. She's like, how can you put the word resource behind the word human? And yeah, did you ever meet Callie Racine? She's got this like amazing mind, and that was one of the things that just really triggered her. Which is a super individualistic person. She understands like the sense of self and the sense of contribution, and that anyone could be referred to as a resource was something that like totally like
Dehumanizing.
Like, yeah, it hurt her just to hear it. But then we have another guy on our team, Armand, who worked in human resources basically his entire career, and he has this amazing ability to identify how people want to have like a work and life balance, and that he was able to teach them to want to be resourceful or to be, you know, like purely in a contribution mindset when they were in their engagement for employment, that they were also able to excel. So like there's so many different ways you can look at how like a company moves forward with the people that are involved in that company, and there's not like right and wrong ways of doing things, with exceptions to maybe like, you know, doing something that you knowingly is a form of exploitation, or you just using dishonesty or deceit to get them to do things they otherwise wouldn't do. You know, if you're going to remove that from the relationship you have with your staff, then whether they're a human resource and they're being resourceful, or they're being an individual and they're allowing their personality to drive their contribution, both ways or everywhere in between can somehow make the company better and go somewhere that those people want to work for. So,
It's an infinitely complex scenario.
it is, because there's not two humans alike. We can make two robots alike, though. And they probably outperform most humans.
Two prints alike.
There's no two prints alike.
Yet.
Huh?
Yet. That's
Yet.
New Zealander for yet.
Oh, yeah. No, there will always be differences.
It's
Agree
nice
with
to
that?
think about two printers or two prints being the same, being able to
Essentially, yeah. I mean, there's always
especially
gonna be,
regionally,
nuances, but
two different spaces.
We know that's possible. I mean, that was the whole motivation of getting from CNC.
Well, it's been a pleasure. I guess we can close it out like this.
That's been fun, man. We've been glad to have you here.
yeah, it's been good having you.
We're
here.
actually
And,
really stoked. We popped your cherry on getting to see live 3D printing.
yeah, I'm
concrete.
really excited. About
Me
that,
too.
man.
We thought that you were going to come here and be like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Seeing better.
You think I would put all this effort into like getting to the position where you guys are willing to have me come here and then not even appreciate it when I get it?
Well, it would have been this. It could have been that like you've seen much better accomplishments than what we've done so far. So
I really don't think that there are much better accomplishments than what you guys have done so far. I think that I think you guys are right on the cutting edge, and I don't think there's anything technologically far more advanced than what you have. I think if there are places where companies have kind of like found advantages, it's in nuanced spaces, and it's in kind of like detail-oriented stuff as opposed to big picture mechanics. Yeah, I talked to this guy, Wessel van Berendonk from Studio Rap Technologies.
yeah, I watched some of that. Yeah.
He also is kind of agnostic towards the different companies in the space, and I asked him, which company do you think is like leading 3D printed concrete? And he wasn't able to put his name one that was necessarily largely in front of the other companies. And I feel kind of the same way. You guys are definitely taking a unique perspective, and you do a lot of customization on the technology that you have. And so, like the other companies, there's like, you found your lane in experimentation and customization, maybe. Which is a cool lane to have if you can hold on to it.
Yeah. Well, we want to
We want to
continue
change the
it,
whole
right?
industry.
Yeah.
As much as we want to change ourselves, we actually want to have an impact on the whole industry. So, you know, we think that we can make Cobalt sell better machines to their clients, and we think we can make X3 sell better machines to their clients. And, yeah. We don't want
Even help.
anyone in the industry to see us as a threat. We want everybody in the industry to see us as being the company that is helping to bring everybody up.
Yeah, there's definitely an advantage to the entire industry moving forward. It's, it's so small right now that everybody helping, any contributions are beneficial for everybody, So,
Yeah, certainly. Hopefully, more people can appreciate that mindset of camaraderie.
it's so early right now. Like I say, a secret today is not a secret tomorrow, So, like, the more we share, the more we have shared with us, presumably. We all move forward. There's a lot.
And that's why we're here sharing this conversation.
There's a lot to be done, yeah.
Cool. All right.
All right.
Good.
Well, I look
Thanks,
forward
Eric.
to our next podcast.
Yeah.